So we're gonna go. Fingers crossed that everything goes smooth. All right. How's it going, everybody? My name is Marco Malmasi of Malmasi Fire Arts. I am here for the very first episode of the Artisans of Steel interview series with my friend and extremely talented knife maker, Mr. Will Brigham. Actually, he's not just a knife maker. He's many things. He's a ceramicist. He's kind of a mad scientist. He's very scientifically minded and artfully minded at the same time. He's a very cool guy. And I'm lucky to know him because I ask him a lot of questions. So, but before we get into everything, I want to go through the sponsors today. Computer here, camera or the phone here. I got all my notes and things in place. So we're gonna start reading through the sponsors real quick, and then we'll get into the conversation. All right. So our first sponsor is Mr. Russell Tinsley. And right off the top, we want to wish him the best. He's been having some heart issues lately, and so he's got to stay out of the shop. New maker. But we want to wish him the best and that he heals up quick. So you can find him both on the Discord in the Discord community, as well as on Instagram as Can't Make Knives. But he, in his full-time job, owns a brewery called Oozlefinch Beers over on Instagram. It's OOZLEFINCH Beers. And they have a big name in the sour beers game. So if you like sour beers and you got a beer market near you, go tell if the beers aren't there, because they distribute to like 25 or 30 different states. If they're not there, talk to your beer market about getting some. All right, and then let's see. Our next sponsor is Mr. Eric Mcrae. So Eric Mcrae, handmade on Instagram. He's a super talented maker from Weatherford, Texas. He is a talented forger. I believe he's in the Discord. He's definitely part of the Patreon community here, and I'm just really excited to have him because he's a damn good forger, and so hopefully he'll be in the community helping answer any kind of questions, possibly around forging, because man's got the skills. And our next sponsor is Michael Poor. He's at Red Dragon Forge on Instagram. Like I mentioned before in I almost said FAQ, the Q&A episode or live stream. He's a very talented cook on top of being a talented forger, and he's making some great mosaics and cool knives. So go check him out, Red Dragon Forge on Instagram. Our next sponsor is Mr. Randy Estep. He's on Instagram as the Scotch Explorer. The man has a keen eye for fine knives and Scotch. So definitely, if you got any questions, especially about Scotch, you want to go direct them to him. I'm not sure if he's in the Discord yet, but hopefully he'll get in there soon. But you can go find him on Instagram at the Scotch Explorer. Next, we got Mr. Gabe Fletcher, who is a new maker. I think he's only been making knives for the last year. He's really excited about being part of this community, but he's also a brewer, and he owns a brewery. He's not an actual brewery. He owns at Anchorage Brewing Co. on Instagram. Right now, they have the #1 rated barley wine in the world. So again, if you got a beer market near you and you don't get it already, talk to them about getting your beer, or the Anchorage Brewing Company's beer. It's really good stuff. Next, we got Maritime Knife Supply. So Maritime Knife Supply is a knife making supplier from the Atlantic Canada, out of Atlantic Canada. I'm sorry. They got everything from hand tools to abrasives to refractory to adhesive to grinders to handle pins and all kinds of stuff in between. So make sure you go check them out, maritimeknifesupply.com. I want to thank them for being a sponsor. Next, we have Mr. Aidan Mckinnon. He's the owner and founder of Cutthroat Australia. I've had the very, very good fortune to have met him in person. He's a good guy. He's doing some interesting and very cool stuff out of Australia. His company specializes in culinary knives and does some really cool collaborations with professional chefs. So make sure you go check out Cutthroat Knives Australia on Instagram. Next, Tony Sazma. Sorry, Tony, if you're in here and I missed that. mess that up. But Tony is a maker he's been making knives for the last 4 years. He's a new sponsor since we did the Q&A. He is based out of Lake in the Hills, Illinois. He specializes in hand forged custom Damascus chef's knives. He's doing a lot of integrals. He does his most recent thing. I'm just looking at it right here on Instagram. He is a kind of a hunter utility. It's like maybe a 6-inch knife. Pretty cool blade, but make sure you go check him out. He is TNT Forge on Instagram. And last but not least, we have Mr. Kari Rakonen. So he is Rocco Knives, RAHKO Knives on Instagram. He is I actually met him at Blade West. Shoot, I'm trying to think now how long ago that was. I think that was in 2019. And that was also the last knife show I went to. But he's actually here in Washington State, along with Mr. Michael Poor. He's in Shelton, Washington, which is only like 30 minutes away from me. He owns a dojo. He's a professional videographer, but he's also into knives and making knives. And he's really excited to be part of the community because he's just getting started in his journey in forging integrals. So without further ado, I'll become a famous podcaster as well. But we have a very talented maker here, Mr. Will Brigham. I'm going to pull something up real quick. I got a little overlay. He makes really incredible knives. Now, not only is he making awesome Damascus knives, but he's making them out of stainless. And so he's making stainless mosaic Damascus knives. And he has been pushing what you can do with stainless, especially regarding mosaic Damascus. I'm going to pull this down so it's not covering up my face anymore. What you can do with mosaic Damascus farther than I've honestly really seen anybody do it. And he and I have talked about doing some collaborations. We've done a little bit, but I look forward to, I have some ideas I want to get over to him because not only would I love to see the patterns in the world, but I'd love to see them in stainless. And I think he's really leading leading this movement with stainless. So I'm going to pull him in here. Mr. Will Brigham. How are you doing today, bud?
Pretty good. I hope it wasn't too distracting. Could you see me in the background all that whole
Not
time?
at all. Not at all.
Oh.
You're perfect. You're
I'm a little bit disappointed then. I was making faces at you. I was moving shit around. I was all over the place.
So, like I was mentioning in the beginning, Will, I'm trying to remember how long ago I first found Will's stuff, but what really blew me away, it was probably like 5 or 6 years ago, was seeing not only the Damascus patterns that he was making, but the fact that he was making them out of stainless completely blew my mind, because I understood at that point, and I still understand now, that making stainless mosaic Damascus is a real challenge, extreme challenge, and he's the only guy that I know is doing it at the level that he is doing it. But not only does he make knives and forge awesome Damascus out of stainless, and not only just stainless, but performing stainless, like martensitic stainless. Both materials are hardenable, which is a big difference between also some stainless you'll see out there in the world. He is also an artist, very talented artist. He is an engineer and a machinist. His big head is hiding a couple machines in the background that he is completely rebuilt. And he is meticulous to the T. And he built that brand new forge over his right shoulder there. Everybody can see. But I want to start, Will, from the very beginning, because honestly, you and I haven't really talked that much about your, I guess we've touched probably here and there about your background, which is why I can say, like, I know that you have your background in ceramics and science, or some sciences and stuff, but I don't know, like when did you first know that you enjoyed creating with your hands? Like, how old are you, or what was like a pivotal moment for you that was kind of like a aha, like a light bulb went off, like, this is something that I love and I want to keep doing?
Man, I should have asked for a list of questions beforehand.
I didn't have one. I'm just making this up off the top of my head.
Honestly, like I grew up with my dad always doing stuff around the house. So like there was never any handyman, like anything like that. Like if he needed to tear down a wall, build a fence, do anything at all, like he did it all. And I was always helping. Like there's pictures of me with like little toy tool belt pretending to do stuff, like as like a baby while he was doing stuff in the garage and everything. And I guess it was in college. I was originally going to go into like international relations, something like that, and I started taking some art classes, and it was one of those drawing classes where you sit on those like it's like that weird bench with like the really high back.
Okay, yeah.
So you can like lean the board up against it.
Yeah.
And I was just like, that's cool. I want one of those at home. So I just went home and I made one. And the professor's like, oh wow, where'd you learn to do that? I'm like, I don't know. I just did
it. Sure.
Like, and that was the first time I was kind of like, oh, not everyone just casually goes and just makes whatever they need when they need it. Like,
sure.
So, but it was probably like around that time, maybe like a few months later, that I decided I really wanted to put my hand more into like making stuff because I was really enjoying it. And it was just this amazing, fortuitous confluence of events that I got an anvil, some cheap Chinese cast anvil, the one you make fun of all the time.
The one that's right there.
Yeah, the one that's right there. With a base that weighs more than the anvil does.
Right.
And I took a sculpture class, and I was looking into taking like a weekend blacksmithing kind of course. And the professor that taught the sculpture class was the same guy that ran the blacksmithing courses.
Okay.
And his name is Leland Means. And he was and he ran blacksmithing and sculpture and stuff, and he still teaches over at Orange Coast College. Okay. And that was kind of like I had no excuses not to just dive headfirst right in there, because I had someone that was open and willing to answer all the questions, and I was lucky enough that they actually had a facility that allowed them. Like it was kind of the welding facility allowed, like on the weekends, these like crazy blacksmiths to come in and screw around.
Sure. Yeah.
And I haven't been over there in quite a few years, but I'm pretty sure the blacksmithing is still up and running over there, because it's very rare to find, especially like in California, Northern California. I think there's more of it, but around here, at least 10 years ago, there was. OCC had its little thing. I think maybe Adams Forge in LA, and like that was it.
I see. So, and real quick, you're in Huntington Beach, California, so just south of LA, about an hour.
Just south of Long Beach.
Oh, just south of Long Beach.
Okay. So it's still about an hour away from LA. Yeah.
Right. So that's interesting. So you were able to look at bench and just say, okay, that makes sense. I understand how that goes together. And then you were able to.
I just did it.
And replicate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think
that was like the first like moment that I realized was kind of like, oh, I'm pretty good at making stuff.
Sure. So yeah, I have it. For me, it was kind of a similar thing. I was in wood shop class, and we had to come up with something. And my mom showed me a picture of a what was it, a sofa cabinet table thing from a magazine, and I was like, okay. So I just like looked at the few pictures that they had in the magazine and filled in some blanks, and we were able to build it. And I think I was like 12 or 13, like in shop school, like shopping. What when I thought you said the same. When was that you built yours? 18, 19?
I was probably 18, yeah.
Okay. And how old are you now?
Yeah, but
just for the record, so everybody understands like where we're at time frame wise.
33.
Oh my God, you're not that old.
Well, I'm as old as you were when I met you, right?
Yeah. I feel like that was a long time ago. Yeah.
Something like that.
Okay, so you start a sculpture class, and at that point you're basically almost in college or a freshman in college, sophomore.
Yeah. I was going to Orange Coast College, community
Yeah.
college. So just getting all the general stuff out of the way, still not knowing really what I wanted to do, but it definitely was leaning toward the arts.
Right.
And
And they had a
uh,
blacksmithing program and something about that. The
yeah.
fire, the
And I
sparks.
mean, I listen to and read way too many fantasy books, so it's just
Okay.
the thought of just like making knives and swords and just working with fire and just like the whole elemental aspect of it.
Sure.
I started. My dad had a shop in Santa Ana, so like another half an hour south. That the guys worked on like the shifts where they were there at like 5 a.m. and left at 3.
Right.
And so only unless like a particularly large job was happening did they have like a second shift. So after 3, there was no one there. So
Sweet.
I just went in and started screwing around.
Right.
And so there was welders and scrap metal and all sorts of stuff. And so I just started. I went in early a few times and had them kind of show me the basics, and I just kind of started
Right.
making stuff.
Wow.
So I
That's
remember
an awesome
my
resource to have.
yeah. But I remember my. I guess I'm kind of self-driven enough that like I don't really want to wait for someone to show me how to do something.
I
Like
got you. Yeah. Sure.
I'll give it a try even if I know I'm probably gonna fail. Like just to at least kind of like figure out like the rough idea. So like if I can't find someone to show me how to do something, I'm just gonna be like, well, try to figure it out. It doesn't work, whatever. So like I remember when I submitted my portfolio to like the arts department at Cal State Long Beach, like I'd already done some like bronze casting and stuff that was just like I built a little furnace and I ordered a crucible, I ordered some bronze, and I just
Sure.
heated it up and it melted, and I made some stuff with it.
Yeah.
In fact,
What was it? Do you remember what it is?
well, I mean, the very first thing was, of
Is it like
course,
a goblet?
oh no, it was a little naked lady torso that I got from it was like some how-to thing I found from this like New Zealand artist that showed like how to do like bronze casting stuff.
Yeah.
And so I just like sculpted it. I'll show you. I actually have it right here.
All right.
Now this is legit, and I should actually finish this out better now, like 10 years later. I don't remember if I ever
Okay.
showed you this. Let me see if
Probably not.
I think it's right here.
By the way, Will
Oh
is
yeah,
like
it's right here.
6'5", and when he reaches up, he's reaching up to like a 10-foot rim.
Oh, it's a little bit rusty. All right.
Oh boy. Oh wow! Look at that thing.
Okay. This is from World of Warcraft.
Sure. Like it.
And I think I was gonna try to submit it to like a BlizzCon or something. I don't remember. It was mainly just an excuse to do it. And so, like, these are all cast bronze pieces.
Right.
And
So for
I
any,
just like,
sorry, go ahead.
so yeah, I just like I think I sculpted some of these in wood, and this is like super sculpty and something else, and then like I made silicon molds of everything and cast it in wax. Of course, these are like plastic gems, which is like super embarrassing.
Yep.
Because like I could totally just like actually set a real stone there now. Although, what kind of stone could possibly justify going in this monstrosity? I'm not sure.
So
I mean, this thing weighs
said
like 15 pounds.
I was gonna say it's so he's holding a bit of a fantasy knife, short sword. What would you call that? I mean,
I don't
it's
know.
not a.
It's a cartoon thing. That's like asking like an anime sword. Like it's 7 feet long and it weighs 300 pounds.
It looks like the material, the castings are maybe an inch thick at the thickest
the
areas.
spine for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, in the game, this was a dagger.
Okay.
But I tried to keep it to scale. I mean, there's like my hand.
Right.
I mean, but like I did this with just reading some tutorials online and just screwing around. Wow. So, and I recast these a handful of times and everything, but yeah, I always forget about this thing. I should put like a real blade in here And
What's in there right now? Is that not metal?
oh, it's
Is
just
it just
mild
mild?
steel.
I got you.
Just mild steel. There's no real edge on there or anything. I don't know. This
Okay,
is a really
so
epic paperweight, though.
it is a very epic paperweight. Oh boy, yeah, listen to it. Um, so you get into the sculpting, and is it clay sculpture, I'm guessing? And also the
Um,
blacksmithing.
well, I mean, when you start taking sculpture, like at university, it's pretty much
Yeah,
in the beginning, it's just kind of all media, just
got you.
whatever.
Whatever. I got you.
Um, and I originally transferred over to Cal State Long Beach because they have a foundry. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they're one of like a handful of schools in California that actually have a full bronze foundry still. And
Wow.
I hope that they still do. I mean, only like one of the UCs still has it. I mean, there's a couple. There's like maybe like one private art school around San Francisco and another one down in like Laguna, maybe one in San Diego, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it used to be every university art department had a bronze foundry,
Okay.
but now they're few and far between. So that was one of the primary reasons. And oh, see, this is one of those. Should I share this or not? The artsy people will get upset. Um, uh, I remember
Go
sitting
ahead.
in my very first intermediate sculpture class, and I was kind of thinking, like, I'm not really feeling this. Like, this is not what I thought sculpture would be. Like, I want to like carve marble and make bronze sculptures, and like,
Sure.
so
You
like,
want to
not
be
this
a
like,
Renaissance sculptor.
yeah, not this like frou weird art stuff. And like the professor was describing these different things, and he described a sculpture that was a canister of inert gas that was opened up, and the inert gas was released and just expanded and expanded and expanded until it became the size of the universe, and that the sculpture was the universe. And I was like, that's some bullshit. I'm out of here. And I immediately went
I
over
agree.
and took a wood class that I met like 5 people and the professor that I'm still friends with to this day.
Oh, wow,
So like
that's great.
it was an excellent decision. But and then from then on, I was just kind of like, no. And then I actually ended up. So when I ended up submitting my portfolio, it was to jewelry metals department, not sculpture.
Okay.
And so uh, my school background is more in like jewelry type fabrication and like small metalsmithing stuff. Uh, and then on the weekends and over the summer, I would do the Damascus stuff just because I couldn't do it at school because they just didn't have the facility for it.
Sure.
But I still wanted to keep my hand in. Uh,
Okay.
and
Can we pause for a
yeah,
second?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So you start freshman year, you're doing sculpture, general sculpture, and then some blacksmithing. How long, and then you start deciding you want to focus on precious metal smithing, jewelry stuff. And then you also go to the woodworking. So when in there do you start, like how far down the road do you start doing the Damascus? I assume you're talking about, and you were making that Damascus on the press that you had built yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so yeah, so when did you discover Damascus? And when was that kind of a turning point and where it became a focus for you?
Honestly, like it was the original focus. Like as soon as I got into doing anything with metal, I wanted to do laminated stuff.
Okay,
Um,
so what was some of the first laminated stuff you were seeing that inspired you to go that direction?
I mean, just seeing just Damascus
Okay,
online and just pictures of different swords and just the classic. Even if I didn't know what it was, like
okay,
remembering seeing like that the watered steel swords and that having
sure,
that kind of classic, kind of mystical appeal to it.
right.
And then at some point, I came across James Binion's work, who is pretty much the godfather of Mokume Gane in America. There's a couple people that did some studying in Japan and brought some of the techniques over in the 70s, but he's the one that really developed solid state diffusion process, the process where you see people making mokame like in a kiln where they're not watching it the whole time.
Right.
Like he worked out the times and the temperatures and all the different things so that you just stick it in the kiln and it does its thing and it comes
Set it
out.
and forget it.
Yes, rather than the classic Japanese technique, which is stare at it and poke it with a stick until it starts to sweat and then very quickly pull it out of the coal.
Before it all melts.
I'm not exaggerating. Like that's really the.
I believe you.
Yeah.
I believe you.
And just seeing like the rings and the jewelry and the different things that he made, where it was just these amazing color contrasts with gold and silver and brass and copper. Yeah. And so I just started like the mokame was really just the huge thing. It was just like, this is amazing. Right. Because it's not superficial. It's not just painted on. It's not just some clear coat that's on there, some powder coat that's some cool paint job on the outside. Like you cut this in half, the layers go all the way through.
Sure.
And oh man, I probably have them around somewhere. But I mean, I tried doing a stainless lamination over 10 years ago in my dad's shop, like before I went to university or anything. I mean, it was a total disaster. Right. Like nothing stuck together. It was huge waste of material. I mean, I'd only done like 1 or 2 Damascus builds ever at that point, and one of them was like mild steel and A2.
Oh wow, yeah, perfect.
That I just because it like the local like industrial metal supply had it, and I was just like, that's cool. Let me try it. And I did that, and that was just by hand. I did it to do for the press, and that was miserable. I think I still have a piece of that lying around too.
Did they stick?
But yeah, I mean, I have some. Oh man, I have some horrible disasters and pictures of like I found some instructions on how to do mokame somewhere, and I'm pretty sure the guy wrote the numbers down wrong because the temperatures were way too hot. I had some canister that had like a pinhole in it, and so I had like molten brass like spraying out like cheese whiz inside of the kiln. Like I had no idea what I was doing. Like I was just like blindly following instructions.
That's really good for the kiln, right?
Oh no! Like it fused. I had to actually clip out a section of Canthal wire. And that's where I found out. See, this is the nice thing too, is especially when you're first starting out or you're a student and you have like zero budget for anything, and you're like, I'm not going to replace all this Canthal wire, but I have some extra here. You can TIG weld Canthal wire. So you can
that's the wire that's inside the. That's the wire that's inside the kilns. All right.
Yeah, you can actually cut a section of kiln wire out and TIG weld in a replacement piece.
Really?
Yeah.
That's wild.
I know, because my old kiln was Frankenstein together in many places. But yeah, I mean, it was just like I love the fact that it wasn't just on the surface, that it was all the way through the piece. So, because I mean, you can from 5 feet away, someone could probably laser etch a cool pattern into a blade, and you'd be like.
Sure.
You might not be able to tell from a few feet away. You pick it up, and you immediately be like, "This is not real."
Yeah.
Like this is just on the surface. You go to refinish this, it's gone.
Even still, I get people asking like, "Wow, that's a really cool pattern. Did you laser etch that?" I'm like,
"Yeah,
no. I spent 5 days in a hot kiln smashing steel, and then I forged the blade by hand." They're like, well, I don't get it."
What really blows people's minds is you have a nice bold mosaic. And you hold it up on one side of the blade and be like, this piece of metal right here that you're touching, and you flip it over, is this piece of metal?
Is that exact?
Like you're touching the same piece of metal on both sides of the blade. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's. Go ahead.
No. So something I keep bringing up is the fact that you are this, what I would consider a bizarre mix of science and art. So we've talked about the art. So science, has that always been a strength for you through schooling and where, I mean, I know your dad is a super brilliant guy. And so was there kind of influences from your dad growing up?
Yeah, like I said, he always had his hand in like doing stuff, working on stuff. Like he could work on cars, he could do that kind of thing. But to be fair, he's not a mechanical engineer. He's like he works on like air separation plants. Like he designs. It's more it's not like as like hands-on technical kind of a thing.
Okay.
Like he very easily could have just been like a desk jockey engineer who just designs stuff in CAD and like never actually like builds anything. But he was always interested enough that he always had his hand in as well. So he was always like, he knows the processes for how things work, which is very beneficial, especially nowadays, because half the time the engineers don't leave a desk. They don't really know like how things are actually fabricated.
Sure.
And yeah, I mean, it was all physics mainly. I mean, chemistry, biology, sure, it's interesting, but like if we get to build a catapult,
yeah,
I'm in. Like,
what do you mean a trebuchet?
Trebuchet, whatever. No, I think no. Wait, trebuchet is weighted on one end, right? Isn't a catapult spring powered or?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Trebuchet. I mean, I've done both. Let's be fair.
Okay.
So like egg drop or whatever, right? They're like, to throw this off the building, it's not going to break. It's like challenge accepted. Like I'm down.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, just so that level of like designing and engineering when it comes to like making something and making something right, not just good enough to work one time, but like doing it the right way, is always just like a personal challenge. Like, yeah,
or a
let's
personal
do this.
problem. I think it's more of a. You and I have had this
Could be a
conversation
personal
before
problem,
because it gets to a point where it becomes a personal problem.
Oh, well, you're the only person that I've ever like described some of like the finishing processes I do, and you're like, yeah, that sounds right. I spend 3 days finishing out a blade too. And other people are like, you're out of your goddamn mind. Like, that's ridiculous. It's like, no, it has to be perfect. If there's a little spot right there, I'm refinishing the whole blade. And most people are like, yeah, whatever, no one will notice it. And you're like, no, I feel you. I do the same thing.
Would you consider yourself a perfectionist?
Yes, but at the same time,
but you're willing to take risks and make mistakes.
Yes.
Okay.
A perfectionist, but never but with the self-knowledge of knowing it's not going to be perfect the first time.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like, so once I have something figured out, like a particular process, I expect it to work. So if I'm going through all the same steps with all the same control variables and I start getting different results, like I'm gonna have a panic attack. Like I just like, why is this not working? It's supposed to work. I'm doing all the things that I'm supposed to be doing. But getting to that point is really rough, especially with the stainless, because there might be, I mean, let's take 304, 316 out and just do austenitic stainless, like hardening stainless. Like there's maybe.
Wait, martensitic stainless, you mean?
I'm sorry, martensitic stainless. Okay. Taking out the austenitic. I mean, there's probably 10 people / companies in the world that are doing it. At least they at least know how to do it, not even regularly do it.
Sure.
And let's call at least 2 of them, like we feel like Vegas Forge in the States, and then Damascus Steel are like not they're full-size companies. Like they're not just an individual. So like take those.
They're producing at a commercial level.
Yeah.
Right.
So like take those 2 out, we're still down to like maybe like 8 individuals. And then 4 or 5 of those are somewhere else in the world, and like there's another like 4 or 5 here, and most of them don't really want to share.
Sure.
Yeah. So like when something dramatically bad happens or something you've never seen happen before, like there's not a lot of people to ask.
It's hard to troubleshoot.
Yeah, I mean, I had something happen one time, and I asked Devin Thomas, and Devin Thomas was just like, "Wow, I've never seen that before," and I'm just like, "Well, fuck." I mean, if he hasn't seen it happen before, I don't even know what to say. Like, I mean, I'm almost proud of myself for finding out a way to screw up stainless that he hadn't seen before.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I do perfectionist, yes, but I mean, I can temper it enough at times with enough.
Okay.
I
With
don't know.
some humility.
Enough realism.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Um, so at what point? So you did say that attempted stainless early on, but that was maybe
Hmm.
a lark. But when did you really start after getting steel sticking together consistently? Like, did you start with carbon a little bit? I
Yeah.
feel like we talked
Yeah.
about this before. You started with carbon, maybe only a little bit, and you said, "Fuck this, I'm gonna go to stainless," and just basically focused on stainless. Or am I remembering that wrong?
No, I mean, it's kind of the way I feel. I feel the same way today. Is no matter how cool your stainless pattern looks, once you start using it, if it starts looking funky like an oil stain, I'm just like, I don't like it.
Right, the
I
carbon steel.
and yeah,
Yeah.
uh, and I was doing a lot of free diving and spearfishing at the time, so I was like, I'm gonna make a stainless Damascus dive knife for myself.
Okay.
I have since learned that that's just from my own experience and from talking to people that that's not really a market that's ever going to exist because dive knives get dropped and lost all the time. So no one's going to want to pay for a knife that they are in all likelihood within a 5 to 10 year period going to lose.
Right.
So, or even less than that. But yeah, at the time, I mean, that's what I really wanted to do. Is I wanted to make one for
Okay.
myself that would that I could use. But uh, I don't know. I guess I've kind of always had between my dad would never at any point say no, I don't think you can do that. Like he's always someone that's kind of like go for it. I mean, why not? And
Sure.
so I had done some just random pattern Damascus, and then it was one of my best friend's 25th birthday. I was like, I want to make you a knife for your birthday. Go online and pick a pattern, any pattern, and I'll figure out how to do it. And he picked a feather.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
still have the very first attempt at it where
Okay.
I I figured out how to do the crushed W's. That's not too much of a stretch.
Yeah.
Um, and then I feathered it, and then when I stuck it back together and drew it out, pretty much every seam pops.
Ooh, fun.
So it's just like these chunks that are kind
Filling
of
it,
connected
filling your
together in the
heart with
middle.
joy.
Yeah, and I was just like, why did I say this? But
Oh my god.
I don't even like. I feel like from that whole build, I got one knife, I
Hey
think.
man, that's something.
But yeah, but it was like, but I did it.
Right.
Uh, and so and once you pull off that, it's kind of like the number of steps that you do, like to do a feather,
Right.
is, I mean, you can pretty much work out anything at that point. I mean,
Sure.
you're
And
essentially making like a tiled mosaic that you just cut in half and then put back together again.
right.
Um,
What
so I
was
don't
this?
know.
What was the stainless combination on that thing?
No, that wasn't stainless. That was just
Oh, that was
15
just
and
okay.
20 and 1080. Yeah.
I got you. I thought you were saying that was
Uh,
stainless. I was thinking about stainless
no,
the
no,
whole
no, no,
time.
no, no, no,
Okay, so
because
that's
I realized that it was that there were technical problems that I needed to figure out how to solve before I went back in there,
okay.
and it was probably another 5 or 6 years, and then I think I got some 304, 316, and I knew it needed to be canistered at this point.
So that
I
brings
think
us
I
up to
canistered it. I may
just
have
like
canistered it
three ago.
before.
Wait. So that brings us up to about 3 years ago.
No, no, this is so we're talking. This was like the first attempts were maybe like 10 years ago, and this was like with me having like I think I
Right.
had the hydraulic press, maybe not. It was like I had no
Sure.
business doing it.
Right.
And then maybe 5 years ago, maybe not. Because I'm trying to think. The California hammer-ins that were held, the ABS hammer-ins I went to
Right.
were
In
2013,
Visalia.
2014, and 2015 in Visalia. And I think it was just before the 2015 one that I had tried again, and I'd
Okay.
managed to get about a third of it to weld. And then I was even like, let's twist it now. Like, let's just go crazy. Uh,
Sure.
and I remember bringing it in, and there was a couple master smiths there. It's maybe even been the one where Rick Fuhr and Jason Knight were there, and they kind of looked at it, and they kind of looked at me, and they're like, "Well, what are you doing? Like, figure out how to do normal shit first, and then try to do this."
Sure.
And I think again, I still have that little chunk that survived. And then after I graduated, it was 2016. I was making Damascus, and I was trying to make like a full-time go of it, but I really wanted to do something that was different, to like distinguish myself from everyone else.
Sure.
In terms of just a business, just trying to like make something that was different, that would be appeal to someone. And I genuinely wanted to figure out how to do the stainless stuff, because I thought being able to make something that just looked the same way it did when you bought it 5 or 6 years later from using it every day.
Yeah.
And at one point I came up with an idea, and I drew it all out on paper, and I thought it was kind of crazy. Like, this is like way too much work. Like, there's no way that this is a practical way of doing it. And I think I ran it past my dad and like a couple other friends that were kind of like engineers or involved with that kind of thing.
Right.
And I was looking up some like different old patents and stuff. Like, if you use like academic database, I mean, even like, you don't even have to be a student nowadays. I mean, you can kind of go on and just look up old patent applications and different stuff.
Right.
And I found a bunch of different laminating things from like BMW, Rolls-Royce, and stuff from like the 40s that kind of had some techniques that were similar to what I was thinking about. But I think the real turning point was probably that. So summer 2015, I went to, I had already been going at least once a year back to Zach Jonas's place in New Hampshire, and I was taking the Japanese metalworking classes with Ford Hallam.
Sure.
And just, you spend 1 week with him, and it's like it's so much knowledge and skill and talent. It's just boiling out of someone, and you're with like 7, 8 other people that are all just as hardcore nerdy as you are, and you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with them for a week. Like, it's magical. Like, it's like, I still think you need to take one of Peter's sword classes. It's just like the same type. It's the exact same vibe, where it's just like you're not like, it's not like regular school where like some people don't really want to be there, or they're doing this, whatever. Like, you're here because you care. Like, you want this. And the backgrounds of all the different people are all slightly different. There might be a jeweler there, or a fabricator, or a knife maker, or someone that's like a sword collector that wants to get in, like put their hand in or whatever. And so there's all this kind of varying things. And at this point, I had never met James Binion or JD Smith. I'd heard a lot about JD because both Zach Jonas and Tom Ward had been his apprentices. And so I'd heard a lot about him, and I'd seen his work. In fact, I even have up on my wall here a ABS Blade Forum post from November 2013, 17th November 2013, and it's JD's post on Fluxless Welding.
Right.
And it was like around there. So it was like fall 2013 that there were, I believe, 2 posts, one from JD and one from Bob Kramer, about the Fluxless Welding. And I think someone like, Owen Wood had done it a bit in the 90s, and a few other people, but a lot of people that figured it out, like they told people, and people were like, nah, you're full of shit. Like, and they just never tried it or something.
Right.
And they were like, fine, I'll just keep doing it by myself, and you guys can keep suffering with flux and silence. And just the way he described it and everything, I was just kind of like, all right, like, I love this level of nerd. Like, this is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And so I went back I took a weekend class at Zach's with Ford, and then I went on to Boston for the Society of North American Goldsmiths conference, the SNAG conference. Where one of my professors was like one of the one of the hosts, and Andrew Mears was presenting.
Okay.
And Andrew and Mears is one of JD's apprentices too, and he was one of the presenters there.
Right.
And James Binion was going to be there. So it was kind of like, all right, I know some people here. I'm not just like blindly going into this conference. I may
Sure.
not have met these people, but like I secondhand know these people. So I can at least
Right.
introduce myself. I'm not just like some random stranger walking
We're
up.
online friends.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And well, I would say even 5 years ago, it was even weirder to walk up to an online friend. Like
Sure. Like,
now it's like
I'm
not
the
as weird. Like people are
I'm the
more
face
okay
behind
with
the
it.
name. Yeah.
Yeah, but even 5 years ago, if you were to be like, "Hi, we're friends on Facebook," they're like, "Who the fuck are you?"
We are.
But
I better check
I
that.
what?
Oh, just nothing. I was just making a stupid joke.
No, it's okay.
Anyway.
I like stupid jokes. Uh, and so what was I'm trying to remember the order here. Um, I I met James Binion and I chatted with him a bit, and I mentioned to him that I was going to be seeing JD that afternoon, and he was like, "Oh, I've never met him. I'd like to meet him." And so I met with JD that afternoon and ended up spending like the rest of the afternoon with him. And he took me out to dinner and brought me back to his place and showed me like he has like every issue of like Blade and Knife magazine since it first was published,
Oh wow.
like on a shelf. Like it's
Right.
crazy. Like, and his collection of stuff is just absolutely it's amazing. And like he's got over his lifetime, I mean, he's had different of the like Spyderco Benchmade. Different people have made models of his that he has lying around, and he has all sorts of different mechanisms and knives and folders, and just like you can just like casually reach into a drawer and pull out some like really collectible like one-off thing,
Sure.
mechanism, and something. And so he's just this amazing wealth of information and just a generally awesome person.
Yeah.
And then I think it was that night or the next night, I found myself having dinner at an Indian restaurant with JD Smith and James Binion and
Wow.
me at the
And
table.
you.
And I was just like, oh my God. Like both of these guys have been doing this for longer than I've been alive at this point.
Sure.
And it was a little bit overwhelming, to be honest. But I knew enough to like understand what they were saying. And to a certain degree ask some of the right questions. Hopefully I didn't bug them too much.
Sure.
I mean, they both still will talk to me
Oh, that's good.
if I reach out to them. So I hope I was never too annoying.
Yeah.
And I've since spent quite a lot of time with JD. I've taken some classes. I took a folder class with him and spent quite a bit more time with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was amazing listening to two of them talk about stuff. Because I mean, even like before things were as connected on the internet, they had both independently come up with a technique that they did for patterning practice, which is using like two different color clays.
Okay.
And they both did that to work different things out. And I don't remember if they thought of it, if they just kind of come up with it spontaneously, or if they'd perhaps seen some of the Narikomi, like the Japanese clay techniques or something like that. But nevertheless, it was interesting to hear like two guys that had never met, but kind of both had their hand in similar fields. Because James is very much jewelry, and JD is, well, he's a master smith. He's done a lot of jewelry stuff as well.
Yeah.
In fact, I think it was like JD, so it was like telling a story about taking a 20-pound billet of fine silver and copper, and he liquid phase diffusion welded it. He
Jeez.
eyeball heated
Oh my God.
a 20-pound billet. So we're talking 10 pounds of fine silver.
Yeah.
By eye in a reducing atmosphere in a forge. And he made that Mokami billet and drew it out for someone that was like making chain or something out of it. But it's just like the cojones to do that is like, you know what you're doing and you're very, very confident that you can do it well.
Yeah. Wow.
And there were just different aspects of what we talked about were things that I was like, I need to remember to like I don't think I had a notepad with me, but like I should have had a notepad with me at that dinner. I think I may have gone home
And a
tried to
pair of
write things down.
microphones.
Oh yeah. Oh god. Yeah, I wish. But I think it was that summer was pretty much I'd gotten a gallery space for school the next spring with nothing to put in it. Because like you had to like the way it worked is like to graduate with a BFA you had to have a show.
Okay.
But anyone could get a gallery space if they wanted to. Like you didn't even have to be a major. Preference went to majors, but if there was an open space, like any student in the art department could get a gallery space and put up whatever they wanted within reason.
Okay, yeah.
And so there was never mind. Actually, I take that back. Not within reason.
Okay.
Some of the stuff that was in there, no, anyone can put whatever they want.
Okay.
And I was like, I'm going to do laminated stuff. So I'm going to have some laminated Damascus knives. I'm going to have some laminated clay stuff, and some Mcrae stuff. So,
okay.
but I have the next 3 months to figure out how to do this.
Sure.
Otherwise, I'm not going to have anything to put in this gallery. And I went to the head of the ceramics department and kind of explained what my idea was, and showed him some of the probably like a couple stacks of quarters that were laminated. Like, look, I've made Mcrae before, and I've made Damascus, and I'd like to try this with clay. And Tony Marsh is just like, this is an awesome professor and person and human being who's just kind of like, and I'm not in the ceramics department. I think I've taken one ceramics class, and he was just like, yeah, for sure, come in during the summer. You can just do whatever you want, like screw around, see if you can get it to work. I was just like, yes. And I managed to figure out how to do it. I was not using the right clay. It was a nightmare, but I managed to get it done, and I made some little pieces. And then I, at the same time, was back here at my studio working out how to do Mcrae. And once I got some of the firing technique down,
sure,
it was just kind of like, all right, let's scale this sucker, and like went straight to like some 13-pound like 3x3x3 cube of copper and brass.
Oh wow.
I've since found, and like anyone that does Mcrae can tell you this, brass is not the easiest metal to work with when it comes to Mcrae.
Why is that?
But brass and copper are cheap.
Yes.
Like they're dirt cheap. Right. So like you can buy $100 worth of copper and brass, and you can make 4 or 5 billets, maybe 10 billets, depending on the size. Like it's plenty of room to fail.
Sure.
And so I just kind of went to town and started trying to figure out how to laminate stuff, and just try to go bigger and bigger and bigger. Right. And then by the time that rolled around, I had 3 or 4 decent sized vessels forged, the material flattened out and raised into vessels. And yeah, I mean, I remember like a handful of students and the teachers were kind of like, where did you learn how to do this? I was just kind of like, the internet, and talking to the 3 people that would give me any information, and just trial and error.
Really quick, raising is what?
Using a stake and a hammer to fold like sheet metal.
It's like a kind of anvil of some sort.
Yeah. There's very small, specifically shaped anvils.
Okay.
That you can that say have like a slight curve. So like it has a curve, and you put a piece of sheet over it, and then you hammer the top, and you can start forming the sheet around it. And so that's how you can take like a flat sheet and then slowly form a vessel out of
like
it.
Like a cup.
Yeah. In fact.
BRB. While he's going and doing that, I'm going to let everybody in the audience know. Will's shop is located in an industrial park with several shops connected to it, like maybe, I don't know, like dozen or 20 or something like that. So there's automotive people, there's other machinists, there's whatnot. So when you hear the compressed air going or cars driving by and honking, that's what's
Oh, has
happening.
that been happening? I like tune it out now. The one
I'm
thing
sure
I'll
you probably
know
don't hear it
is
anymore
if my one neighbor starts using the die grinder, I promise you I will go close the door because it will be horrendous.
because it's
Uh,
wee.
but like I have like this, so I made this little dude.
Put it closer to the camera. Wow. Okay, so it's a little cup with a base and a lid.
So this was like a separate piece, and
Right.
then this little dude here, and then made these little feet. And
Is it all out of Mokame, or is it
yeah,
solid
this is
material?
copper. This is copper and brass. I think the feet and the little lid right here are solid copper.
Okay.
But yeah, so it's just like making a piece of sheet and then hammering it out and then
Oh wow.
exposing the layers in different ways.
So is it similar when you expose the layers? Is it similar to exposing like a random pattern Damascus?
It is exactly the same.
Okay. So you intentionally
And
texture it and then grind away material.
so like all of these lines here, like
Yep.
these,
Yep.
where I knew that at a certain depth I had some nickel silver. So I very purposefully carved down to that layer
I see.
so that I could just expose it in those areas.
Right, and then you
So
continue hammering, and that smooths the surface
yeah.
back out.
And so that's
Okay.
what's interesting about some of the patterning techniques with Mokame is you're still working like when you think about it, it's more the flat layers of like a random pattern.
Yeah.
Except you have the potential for exposing color as
Right.
well as pattern. I
What an
kept
interesting thing.
it's interesting. I know we've talked about this before about how the only way I can think to describe this and a lot of the other Damascus stuff is it's you have to be able to think four dimensionally. And I'm not trying to be all crazy metaphysical here. Like I'm like thinking seriously. You're thinking about a three-dimensional object that has depth to it.
Right.
Right. So you can't just think about the outside dimensions being manipulated because everything you're doing to the outside is affecting what's happening on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how is that not four-dimensional? I guess time isn't involved, but so a quantum theorist would disagree. But I mean, it's more than just the three dimensions. I think you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But there's, and I have since in the last few years seen there's a guy I think he's in Germany, who's been doing some legit mosaics with Mokame, like gold, silver, and he's actually restacking. And so the patterns he's getting are through and through.
Right. I'd love to see those.
Yeah, I can send you some of the pictures. It's somewhere in my 48,000 images on my phone. But
on your phone?
Oh yeah.
Oh my god.
Yeah, you want me
I
to
believe
check?
it.
Let's see.
No.
Oh no, now I want to know.
Okay. So.
Oh, I'm sorry. 40,800.
You're such a liar.
I know. I thought it was closer to 50. But okay, I do have a point here.
Okay, let's hear it.
I think that my success with stainless came from thinking of it like mokamegane and not like Damascus steel. Because the prep work and the cleanliness, the attention to detail that needs to go into the material before you start heating it for stainless and Mokame is essentially the same.
Okay.
Whereas when you're dealing with carbon steel, flux lets you get away with a lot.
Right.
I mean, you can essentially just, I think some people have even shown you can take like a stack of rusty files, flux the hell out of them, get it hot, squish it, and you can get them to stick.
I'm pretty sure I saw that on Fortune Fire.
I'm not even gonna go there. You can't bait me that easily. So I think like going through these just a hilarious number of hours where you are very carefully cleaning copper, brass, nickel, silver sheets, and making sure there isn't a single speck of dust or spit or oil or anything on there. and then making sure they're kept perfectly clean, and then stacking them up, and then getting them all to laminate together. You do that enough times, and then you just simply do the same thing to stainless steels. You can get it to stick, but
Wow.
it requires you not screwing around. Like,
So you're wearing like a hazmat suit while you're doing this, or?
I've never gone so far as wearing wearing a mask, but when I'm doing the mokame, I'm fully gloved up.
Sure.
And I will purposely wash like a whole stack of like lint-free like microfiber towels to like dry everything off as they're going.
Yep.
I think Binion and some other people have like little dedicated like little drying setups, like little fans for like little pieces so they can quickly be kept dry. Should I answer questions? Acetone.
Yeah. David Singer is asking, is he using are you using acetone to clean the materials?
For any paint, ink, grease, debris, stuff like that, yes. But final cleaning is 100% soap and water. Perhaps
It's
for the mokame,
like liquid dish soap?
like Dawn, Dial, stuff they use on baby animals to clean them all the oil off them. I don't know which Dawn or Dial, whatever. I would even use a little bit of pumice or rotten stone to add abrasive quality, and then in my imagination, oil will cling to tiny particles of grit. Don't know if that's real or not, but in my head, that's what's totally happening. And because you don't want any residue. I mean, the only thing you could possibly clean with is some like industrial thing like MEK or something might leave enough little residue, but acetone leaves enough of a residue that it'll affect a bond.
Interesting. Yeah.
I've even gone so far as only the hardcore nerds are going to appreciate this one. All right,
let's hear it.
So, I had heard this might be a trick I heard from Binion, because he's used to working with like gold, and so like multiple alloys of gold. I mean, that mad scientist actually alloys his own gold, in like a glove box. Have you seen those videos where he has like this double TIG torch thing in a glove box, and he takes like pure gold and the alloying elements and he makes it all himself? Is that after you clean the pieces, you put them in a little vacuum chamber, because even if there's any residual moisture, because water will boil at a lower temperature in a vacuum, you can actually even boil off any residual moisture that's on it. And
that makes sense.
But you can hold it there. If you keep the vacuum drawn on the clean material, you can leave it there for essentially as long as you want. It's not going to oxidize.
Right.
So, like, if you're doing a big mokame billet, unless you wake up early and spend like 4 hours cleaning the giant stack of material, sometimes by the time you're done cleaning the end of the material, like the beginning of the material is now oxidizing. And so I even the very first time
the endless cycle.
Oh yeah, it's horrible. I mean, pretty much everyone. I think David Barnhill's done this. I'm sure anyone that's done big stuff like tries to get like a friend or family member to help them when they're doing a huge billet, because like you have like this time thing. Like you have to, like, all this material has to be cleaned before it starts oxidizing again.
Sure.
And at one of Travis Wirtz's hammer-ins, I brought a billet to laminate there, and I cleaned everything beforehand. I stacked up the billet, put it in the torque plates. I futzed around with some fittings. I drew a vacuum on this little vacuum pot, and then I back purged it with argon, and then I drove to Arizona with it. And it worked.
I'm glad that you had all the equipment to do that.
Well, I mean, if you got a welder, you got an argon bottle. I mean, so it's like,
I
didn't go out and buy anything. Yeah, but I mean, like if you've done any wood stabilizing or something, I mean, it's just it's not a very big. It's just a little chamber.
That's actually a good call. Yeah, right.
And so I drove to Arizona with it, and I mean, it totally worked. But it's kind of like that level of, like, it's that level of crazy that you have to be.
Yeah,
me?
sorry about that. Here, I'll be right. I'm gonna mute this.
Oh, that's you.
Straight up amateur hour over here.
Now I'm worried about mine going off.
I've done that like 3 or 4 times on the Knife Talk podcast now, which is pretty
really?
hilarious and shocking.
You don't have like a little note that says like things to
Turn on.
do,
I
like
actually
it's like a movie theater. Mute your
checklist.
phone.
Yeah. Let's go out to the movies and turn your air compressor off, dummy.
Oh my god, I don't think they've sung that little ditty for quite a long. You're dating yourself a little bit there.
What? The last time I went to the theater was like maybe a couple of years ago. They did that.
I don't know. Maybe they still do.
They had a new version. Like Coca-Cola vamped it up. Anyways, okay.
But
so
but I mean,
stuff's
essentially,
got to be clean. And
yeah,
what kind of time
and
frame are you talking about? Like 5 minutes or a couple hours?
For copper and like brass?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, once it's totally clean. Oh, I mean, part of it depends on your local humidity and temperature. But I mean, we're talking copper. I wouldn't give more than an hour.
Wow.
To perfectly clean copper before it was stacked up and everything. You mean, like I said, it depends on humidity and a bunch of other factors. But if you were in the desert, you might be able to get away with like a few hours. But I personally wouldn't trust it. I mean, that's why when you see people do the little Mcrae classes and stuff, they usually just do these tiny things, so they can these tiny pieces, so they can quickly scrub everything and quickly wash them and all stack them up and everything.
Sure.
But if you apply that level of paranoia to,
I mean, it sounds merited.
But I mean, like, and I say paranoia because you don't want to be 3 days in and like a bunch of material only to have it fail. So like it's justified paranoia. It's in both Mcrae and the stainless laminations. Like there's no, oh, let's add some flux to this crack and close it up.
Because it's incredibly time intensive.
There's no fixing anything.
What is it that's getting those materials to stick together? It's not just that they're not just, because I think you were talking about James Binion, like he wasn't just sitting there watching it until it sweat. He had figured out a different way to approach it.
In terms of how it's sticking, it's the same. I mean, it's like time, time, temperature, and pressure. So with steel, it's a lot more malleable, and like the grain is much more open when it's at temperature. And at least with iron and carbon steel, the flux is aggressive enough that it just prevents any oxygen from getting on there and scaling. But with precious metals, and well, even not even just precious metals, just copper, brass, and then with stainless, I've heard theoretically you can use a flux that involves like fluoride or something. So sure, it'll eat the chromium oxide, but it'll also kill you.
So cool.
No, like there's actually like an old Blade Forum post of someone doing it and actually getting really sick from breathing in like the fluoride fumes.
Thanks.
But it's, I mean, all the technique, what's physically happening is the same in every situation. It's just the environment around it has to be different. So for with Mcrae, you need a heavy reducing atmosphere, like I don't know like to what degree, but I mean because you obviously combustion is still occurring,
right? So
there's enough oxygen present for combustion to occur, but not enough for pretty much for there to be any else present. And that's why the original Japanese techniques, they did it in like a charcoal or coal forge, because it was
Okay.
essentially buried in this little area where there was no oxygen.
Right.
Uh, but you had to be very carefully watching it.
Right.
Binion worked out the times and temperatures required. I mean, he wasn't the only one. There was a Steve Midget, and then I always forget there was another guy. I have his book on the shelf somewhere. Who they worked out the times and the temperatures where these things occurred, so that you could do it blind.
Right.
So if you know that a certain amount of diffusion is going to occur between the two materials, then you don't really have to be watching it. So you put it in a canister or a package surrounded by charcoal, activated carbon, under pressure in some plates, and when it comes out the other end, after a certain amount of time, it's going to be stuck together.
Right.
And taking all that guesswork out, you can also fine tune those times and temperatures to make as strong a bond as possible. I'm pretty sure that some of the early books that came out, like in the early 2000s, I think it was around then, like a lot of the information in them isn't necessarily wrong, but it has since been adjusted quite a bit by like the experts. Like they've changed a lot of them to optimize them. Some of those times and temperatures may very well still work, but I know, like with some, the temperatures have dropped actually a lot. So you drop the temperature a lot, but then you go in for longer. And like I think it was something that Binion said with some of the not just precious metals, but any of the copper alloys. Sure. I mean, you have copper and you have brass, and there's a reason why brass is what it is. I mean, it has a specific amount of zinc in it, because it has particular properties with that amount of zinc in it.
Okay.
And it might vary a little bit, but like I said, there's a reason, because that's a particularly stable combination. And so if you have copper and you have brass, and they start diffusing, the longer they're diffusing, you're getting this rainbow gradient of alloys, of variation between of essentially different variations of brass into pure copper.
Right.
Okay. So the longer you diffuse, the likelihood of there being a band in that gradient that doesn't want to play well with everyone else gets higher.
I got you.
So it's similar to kind of like the carbon migration that we get with damascus, and where you add in that's where the nickel doesn't allow for diffusion, and that's why you add in different alloying elements to prevent some of that. But that's a lot harder to do with some of the other metals.
Sure.
So it's like copper, brass. I've actually solid state alloyed a brass bowl.
Wow.
I made so many thin layers of copper and brass that they essentially diffuse into themselves and is all one material.
That's wild.
It was devastating. It was like this
it just
vessel
didn't want to move.
No, I raised this huge vessel that was like the biggest billet I'd ever made, and I went to etch it to see what it looked like, and there was nothing there.
Oh,
it was gone.
I'm sorry.
It's
I'm
not
laughing.
funny. Don't laugh.
But this is how we learn, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, oh my God, talk about time. Jeez.
Holy smokes!
I mean,
can't imagine raising that.
We're talking like a solid 2 weeks worth of work.
Oh my God.
Bye. So I had it was 3-inch stack that was 75 layers.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to do the math now, but it's they're all 18 gauge. We'll take 3 inches and make that 18 gauge,
Oh, geez.
Each of those layers is like a tenth of a human hair.
Right.
So when I first laminated, drew it out, when it was first like a big, round, flat piece,
Yeah.
you could see the pattern.
Sure.
And then when I carved into it to make the pattern, you could still see it. But then every time I would raise it further and I'd anneal it, every time I annealed it, I diffused it a little bit more. Every time
Oh,
I heated
right.
it up,
Because
and
the
then by the time
material
it was,
work hardens,
yeah.
and you gotta go through
So
those annealing cycles.
yeah, and every
I
time I
forget about
added
that.
more heat, I caused more diffusion, and so by the time it
Okay.
was done, it was just there was nothing there.
Sure.
Yeah, that one sucked.
Okay. Well, I got some questions for you.
All right.
First, what's on your workbench right now? What have you been working on?
I almost don't want to say because I have so many people waiting for knives.
Oh.
Uh,
Don't worry.
I have
None of them are watching
I
this.
have some chopsticks.
Chopsticks. All right. Cool. Here, I'm gonna
Uh,
try to figure out how to get you closer to the screen.
I mean, I can move closer to the screen.
I think if I do that, boom.
Is that better?
Okay, there you are. And what kind of material are these made out of?
Desert ironwood
That sounds nice.
that have all been like texturized and polished.
Cool.
And I burned the maker's mark on there. I don't know if you can see that.
Yeah.
There you go. These are all Christmas presents that are
Okay.
Christmas presents aren't officially late until it's no longer January.
Until
That
it's
is my new
Christmas again.
rule. No, January. I'm giving myself January. As long as they're delivered in January, it's all good.
Okay. Any steel you're working on?
I have this paring knife right here.
Yeah, those are pretty.
And this paring knife right here. So this is the mirror finish on one, and then like the stonewash finish
I got you.
on the other. And then this little dude right here. And these are actually all
like a little bird and trout.
Yeah, these are all actually gifts. So hopefully the people that are getting them don't see this until they get them. So because they're ready, I need to mail them out. Those are actually for the people that helped me build and design the forges, because I harassed some people with a lot of questions.
I got you.
And
this isn't available to the public for a couple months still.
Okay, cool.
You got time.
Awesome. Perfect. All right. Yeah, no. So I signed some NDAs, and like I used some controls that are planning on marketing.
Right.
And so they were kind enough to let me kind of beta test and use them and explore with that. And what else do I have on here? See, this is level of like trying to figure shit out. So I've had some weird like blurry patches in the not in the mosaics, but in like the random patterns. And I'm trying to figure out what's causing it. And so I have so here's a billet, like there's an end cut of the billet.
Right.
And so I cut it diagonally.
Sure.
And so now I have all of the layers exposed.
Yeah.
And so I just heat treated these. And so now I'm going to polish and etch them, and I'll be able to see all 150 layers cut diagonally. And I want to see if there's any like spots, any areas in the lamination that are weird or fuzzy or something. And then I have 150 layer from the same billet that was just laddered and then Blanchard ground flat. And then this is 30 layers from the same billet that was ladder and Blanchard ground flat. So I have all of the varying layers from the different stages are all going to be exposed here.
Right.
So if a flaw shows up at some point here, I'll know it's in that the flaw is occurring somewhere in the formation of the billet. If it's not, then it's happening during the patterning. And so then this piece here is a piece that was then patterned the same way I patterned the random pattern blades.
Yeah.
And so I'll see if maybe it's in that technique that the problem is occurring.
I'd be curious to see the blurry spots that you're talking about. Not necessarily right now, but just in general.
Oh, I can send you plenty of detailed pictures.
Okay.
And the pictures are better because in the videos you hear me crying in the background.
That's perfect. I love it. Okay, I got another question for you. I struggle with explaining why fluxless welding works, and you are a more minded person,
All
and I
right.
feel like you've had this discussion. We don't have to go like super demonstration
Nah.
or
I'm
anything like
taking this
that.
off the wall. I'm gonna read the JD Smith post.
You're just gonna read. All right, if you're gonna just read it straight off the post, then
Whoa,
I could
no.
direct people.
Um, dude, I don't know where on the forums this is. This is
Sure.
nah, dude. I have to read this because JD wrote it, and it starts with hitherto.
Okay. Hitherto.
Uh, Hitherto, we've all pretty much accepted flux as a necessary evil. The borax-based flux commonly in use works as a solvent to dissolve oxides and some other non-combustible surface contaminants. After it's been applied, it liquefies, and capillary action allows it to penetrate voids and crevices. And if all goes well, the liquid borax, along with the dissolved oxides, etc., get ejected when the steel is struck or pressed, leaving clean metal surfaces to touch without oxide barriers, allowing the bond. Problems occur when the flux gets trapped in small pockets that prevent its escape. We all know the ugly boogers this welding causes. Uh, Even the most experienced among us experience this from time to time. Welding without flux or oil simply utilizes the chemistry of combustion to do the heavy lifting. All we do is simply step out of the way and allow metal to do what it naturally does. Fire, as we've all been taught, needs three things: fuel, oxygen, and heat. Remove any one of these and the equation and the combustion ceases. Creating a reducing atmosphere in the forge environment starves the fire of vital oxygen. The chemical reaction of combustion begins to seek oxygen from any available source, namely in this case, the oxides in the metallic surface, depleting them of oxygen and reverting them back to iron, which is now quite hot and in a highly energetic state. In this energetic state, the atoms of iron will undergo covalent bonding when brought in close proximity with a neighbor. This is the part I'm not entirely sure that's true.
Okay.
But the point is that, okay, so two adjacent atoms will share the outermost electron orbits, forming a bond. Fluxless method appears to form many more of these bonds much quicker. It can set a primary weld in a leg vise with this method and go straight to hammering the bill at 90 degrees from its original orientation.
Which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, and I remember he did that actually at Dragon's Breath Forge,
Sure.
where he did that, where he took it out and he put it in a leg vise and he clamped it, and then he immediately just started forging it on edge. In the language of chemists, we're creating what is known as an oxygen reduction reaction. I know that there's a lot of people that have kind of argued about what exactly is happening, like at a crystalline, like atomic level, but it's actually the ceramicists that probably know more than anyone else, because that's how the vast majority of glazes are done, by adjusting the atmosphere of a kiln, and they can get a huge range of colors and textures to form.
Just by changing how much oxygen is available inside the kiln?
100%.
Really?
Some ceramics glazes can go from blue to green to red just by adjusting the atmosphere.
That is
Yeah,
bizarre. I would
it's
love to
crazy.
see that. I would
Yeah,
love to see
it's
that.
crazy. In fact, like I've seen some cups that were glazed where it has the same glaze on the inside and the outside is kind of like a pale blue, and the inside of the cup is red.
Right.
And so, like when I was first hearing about all this and started dabbling in ceramics, I was just like, blacksmiths would have figured out this fluxless welding like 500 years ago if they'd ever just like talked to like a ceramics person. Because like some of these ceramic techniques have been easily around for like 5,000 years. Like this is all over the world. I mean, some of these glazes and stuff are like ancient Chinese pots that have like amazing glazes on them, and so they knew exactly what was going on.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, you're I mean, ideally, can you hear that?
I can hear it.
All right, I'll be right back.
He's gonna go close the door. Whew. All right. It's been a good, I think, hour and a half already. I think Will can still hear me.
I can't.
Cool. Because he's got his Bluetooth in. We're gonna.
Sorry.
Is that a lawnmower out there? I didn't know you had any grass anywhere nearby. I thought it was all concrete. Oh, there you go.
Power washer.
Oh, power washer.
All right.
We're kind of getting into the questions section of the conversation.
And now, rather than having like huge glare on the side of my face, I have like a dark side.
I like the glare.
Fuck, what were we talking about?
Glazes and how and oxygen.
So I mean,
reduction.
This is where like carbon steel is actually fairly forgiving.
Okay.
In that its oxides break down pretty easily.
What are the oxides comprised of?
Oh, why you gotta put me on the spot like that?
I mean, is it basically just iron and oxygen?
It's carbon and oxygen. I mean, it's rust.
Okay.
I mean, it's just rust occurring at a fantastic speed.
Okay.
Like if we're talking like chemistry, I mean, when you're taking like an oxyacetylene torch and you're like cutting and you're like you're essentially creating like the oxidation is happening at such an elevated temperature that you can cut with it. So I mean, that's like
oxygen
like
destroys everything, right?
Oxygen destroys everything. Yes, I've seen those memes where they're joking about how like oxygen may actually be poisoning people. It just takes like 80 to 100 years to kill them.
I haven't seen that, but it makes sense.
So I mean, if you can, like, this is why you can get different copper alloys and precious metals to laminate in a reducing atmosphere, just like you can do it with steel. But I mean, the more reducing, the better.
Sure.
I mean, the exact same techniques that are used for making Mcrae, the whole like cleaning, stacking up with like no flux, and like putting it between like some plates and bolting it all together really tight and sticking it in the forge and reducing the atmosphere. You could do Damascus like that.
They just need to be clean and flat and
yeah.
Right. Interesting.
I've essentially done that with the actual torque plates I have are only like they're 2 half-inch pieces of mild steel, and I want it to be 1 inch. Yeah. I mean, that torque plate has never gone over 1450, right. And they're bonded together.
Yeah,
I believe they're one piece now. So I mean, I think I'm probably going to get this wrong, but I think Binion's done an experiment where he's gotten copper to laminate at like 900 degrees or lower, because he then put it under like some like 200 or 300 ton press. So you decrease the temperature, increase the pressure, and you can still get the formula to get the same result.
So the things happen kind of on a spectrum. It's just like if you have more heat, you need less pressure. You have less heat, more pressure. There's like an exchange of sorts.
There's this is like the weird shit you get from like spending multiple nights sitting around Fort Hallam at like a dinner table. Like I think he was the one telling us about there's a giant Buddha statue in Japan somewhere that was originally gold plated.
Okay.
The gold is now no longer on the surface. It's actually bonded, like it's a part of the copper.
Oh, it's not plated anymore. It is part.
No, like it hasn't worn off. It's actually a part of the chemical structure of the copper now, because it was such a thin layer, and it was like 1,000 years ago, and so enough time has occurred that the actual diffusion happened without the heat and the pressure.
Right. So I mean, so time, temperature.
Mind you, it takes 1,000 years to happen. So I mean, you don't want to wait that long. But it's like if you take those three things and you mix them up, mix the formula up, you can get
Right.
the same results or similar results.
Wild. So, Kari here, Rakonen, he says, so by varying the oxygen in your kiln or forge, it's kind of like the way you adjust your shielding gas for the
Yeah,
TIG.
yeah, exactly.
So by dialing it back, you have more fuel in there, or unburned fuel, or fuel that's starving for oxygen, right?
Yeah, I mean, for most, I mean, in some like MIG welding, you can have. I know that they have some mixes that actually allows for like a little bit of oxidation to occur. It might even be for cleaning purposes, where they have like carbon dioxide or something. But most of with a lot of times with the shielding gases, you just want it to be no oxygen,
Right.
if at all possible. And you can do carbon steel, Damascus, and uh, any type of non-ferrous metal lamination in a pure vacuum, or
Right.
in a nitrogen or argon or helium uh, chamber. Uh, so I mean, ideally, I mean that's the best way to do it. That's the way I
Sure.
do it. I mean, just like don't try to vary the oxygen. Just
Why don't you do
get
it that
rid of
way?
it. Because
This is a pretty involved process.
no, because it's a lot. There's more. I mean, I guess the last few times I've done mokame, I still have done it in like a container with charcoal, but I've also done it where I've purged a canister. Um,
Sure.
uh, I I guess it's just there's a little bit more guesswork involved because you use. I'm sure there are sensors that you could use to determine the exact oxygen content of a particular volume at temperature, but
Okay.
they tend to not be. I don't know if it's not accurate enough because a couple of guys have actually figured out ways to use oxygen sensors in the forges, and they're actually oxygen sensors from cars that are determining the oxygen of the fuel mix and like how efficiently the car is burning.
Right.
But uh, my problem with that is it only takes a couple seconds of not having a reducing atmosphere for it to fail.
I see.
So if at any point you lose that reduction, it's game over.
Right.
So I'm more comfortable just purge the sucker at all times, no oxygen, no worries.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Another question for you. If I were to try to make a stainless clad sandmine tomorrow, and I just have a forge and a press and a TIG welder, what would you suggest I do?
You just take the seams together.
That's it? So what about the
Yeah.
oxygen inside the packet? Is that a concern, or should I?
I mean, you just want to make sure it's as flat, the pieces are as flat as possible. I mean,
Okay.
if you have the means of I mean, honestly, like the flatter the better. If you could surface grind it, that's ideal.
Sure.
But I mean, you could just do like a 220 grit finish. But again, like as flat as possible. Like
Right.
I've seen like at one of the hammer ends, like Owen Wood uh, had his those crazy like chevrons, and he's got like the twisted explosions or whatever.
Yep.
And I mean, he surface grinds all of his pieces, so they are dead flat, smooth. He
Right.
puts them in this little packet. He heats it up and he just taps it with a hammer
Right.
and he sets the welds because the surface area. I mean, we're talking. Okay, this is getting nerdy again, but like zoom in, right?
Yeah.
Use a microscope. If you're like 36 grit, you've got all these peaks and valleys. Like the surface area is bigger,
Sure.
right? So the finer the grit finish you go, the less surface area there is, the easier it is for the bond to occur because less movement has to happen.
Sure. Do you
So
wash them too?
my stainless, I do. Yes, I do.
Okay. Okay.
Um,
Sorry. All right. So
that
versus
being said, I don't know that you do, that you 100% need to. No, I'm pretty sure you do. Yeah, you need to.
right, because if you clean it on the machine, there's potentially some sort of
Yeah, especially
aggregate.
if you're using yeah, I mean a fresh belt could leave little particles of ceramic on there.
Right.
A dirty belt could leave particles of wood of of carbon steel or something else on there. But I mean,
Yeah.
but if we're talking specifically like a Sanmai, yeah, I mean, I've done Blanchard ground finish, so we're talking like it's a nice and flat but 36 grit finish.
Okay.
And you stack them together. In fact, the first time that Neil was at my shop with Combat,
Sure.
I did one like while they were filming, like while everyone was chatting. Like I surface ground 2 pieces of 410 and a piece of Crew Forge, and I clamped them together and I TIG welded the seam and I stuck it in the forge and we hammered it out and it's done. Like
Okay.
it's just, but like cleanliness and flatness is the big thing.
Okay. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Did you have
No,
more?
I mean it's that kind of you create the packet, you create the canister by welding the seam
Using the
together.
I got you. Okay. Is there? I don't know
Don't flux core MIG weld it. I give no assurance if you flux core MIG welding it, because
What
there's
about
all
what if
sorts
you
of
don't?
nasty, dirty.
What if you do just regular MIG, no flux core?
That should work. Yeah.
Okay. Is there a core cladding
I mean,
combination that
I
doesn't
know
play?
it works because that's the classic way to do it. I mean,
Sure.
I think like what's it, Carl Anderson, like Ed McCaffrey or something, like some of the
Yep.
OG forum guys that did it. I mean, that's the classic way to do it is you just MIG weld it. I mean, I TIG it because I like the idea of not adding additional material that you have to
Sure.
grind off. But it arguably, if you get really good penetration, and it's a hell of a lot faster to MIG weld it.
Sure.
Which could another arguably be another issue where the longer you're taking to weld it up, the more as you're heating up around there, you could have little creep around the edges and stuff.
Right.
But yes, you can absolutely just MIG weld it together.
Interesting. Okay. Core and cladding combinations. What don't play together? Or I guess what would you if I was just gonna do basic stainless Sanmai? One, would I use nickel shims? And two, what would be does the cladding vary based on on the core material?
As nice as it is to have the shiny 304 or 316 on the outside, uh, it's just a numbers game as to whether or not you're going to split the core. I think it was
Is
something like
that's from thermal expansion?
yeah, because
Right.
your core material is going to be undergoing phase change and it's going to be expanding and contracting, and your outside steel, the austenitic, is just staying. It is what it is,
Right.
and so you essentially just the lamination will be strong, but the core material will just crack. I'm trying to remember who it was that was telling me that they used to heat treat a whole bunch of. You can edit this out because I'm embarrassed. I don't remember his name. Who's the L6 Katana guy? Howard Clark.
Okay.
Howard Clark was heat treating a bunch of like what?
Just that's a great screen name. L6 Katana guy.
L6 Katana guy. His Japanese name is Big Ear. Something
Okay.
like Omi, whatever. Never mind.
Anyways. That part I'll
So
edit out.
what was I just watching? Have you seen Ted Lasso yet? You need to. There's a part where the guy's like, he makes an ass out of himself, and he says like, you can edit that out, right? And they're like, we're live. And he's like, oh. Okay, so Howard Clark heat treated a bunch of 304 clad like 01 core blades.
Okay.
And it's kind of like a lot of them survived, a lot of them didn't.
304. Okay.
304.
Okay.
So you get like this very corrosion resistant, nice and shiny outer surface with a really strong contrast, but whether or not they survive, I honestly don't remember. I talked to him about that a number of years ago, but just talking with other people. There's the German Achim Wirtz, Achim Wirtz.
Yeah.
He makes like Sanmai billets that are like some nice German like tungsten carbon steel core with 304 cladding that are like the size of a car.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah,
we're talking
he's using legit crane.
yeah, like 8-inch layers, like some
Yeah.
like 5,000-pound billet or whatever, and it's all rolled. And he says he's never had a core crack on any of the material that he sold to people.
Okay.
Okay. I believe him, but I don't know why.
Okay.
Like I don't know if it has something to do with the fact that the way it was processed, like going from such a large starting material to being
Sure.
drawn down, that perhaps enough maybe carbon is diffused into the 304 that makes it maybe move a little bit. I mean, I don't know. I'm just talking out my ass now. I mean, I don't know why, because pretty much everyone that I've talked to that has done a number of 304 cladded things is like you're gonna break them. Like
Okay, so you're saying 304 is not a good cladding.
no, I mean,
Okay.
I don't know
Now,
what the statistics are, but like if you try heat treating 10 knives, like you're not gonna have 10 knives.
now does that change based on if it's a deep hardening steel versus a shallow hardening steel? No, it doesn't.
No,
304
because
is
I mean,
not great.
because the ones I've done, I've had it happen with O1 and Crew Forge and 1084, and I think 52100 as well.
Sure. Okay, so 304 is out the window. What about 316?
So same thing. You're gonna have the exact same problems.
Really? Okay.
That's where I mean, if you're just doing a San Mai, I mean, it would be hilariously expensive, but like you could do CPM 154.
Okay.
Because you obviously, and you wouldn't ever heat treat it for its full capabilities in terms of like edge
Right.
and corrosion resistance, but you would have a
Because you would
shiny
never
outside.
you would never take it that high in temp.
Yeah, you'd never take it high enough to heat treat the CPM 154, but I mean, theoretically you could do that on the outside, and it would at least be undergoing some sort of physical growth and expansion and contraction, and it would probably survive. But and I only say that because of the high molybdenum, it would stay pretty shiny.
Yeah.
The most common nowadays is 410 or 416.
Okay.
And the only downside to that is it's going to stay looking stainless in terms of its color, like its light refraction, like the way it's kind of like that paler silver color. But every time you etch it, it is going to go matte. It's not going to stay shiny.
Oh, interesting.
And you want to do 410 if you can get it, not 416.
Okay, so 410 is the ideal, ideally with a nickel shim to help prevent carbon migration.
Honestly, the nickel shim is just aesthetics. If you like seeing that shiny line, yes, it does prevent the migration. But again, we've already discussed how to prevent migration.
How?
If you're going to do a high temperature, you do a very short soak time. If you're going to do a lower temperature, you can do a longer soak time. But it's the
Right.
longer it's in there at the higher the temperature, the more migration is going to occur. In fact, I was just, oh my gosh, I'm talking so much. Usually I'm just like alone in my shop, just like you.
Me too. Just like everybody listening and watching this, probably.
I've made friends with a PhD metallurgist at SpaceX.
At SpaceX. Okay.
At SpaceX. My buddy that worked there for years did one good thing before he left, and he made friends for me in the
That's great.
in the on he's like on the Starship on the star. I don't want to say just in case I don't want to get in trouble for freelancing by helping some noob. But I was talking to him about this recently, and the diffusion that occurs with all elements and all metals is exponential when it comes to temperature. So if you overheat by just 30 seconds, a minute, the amount of diffusion that can occur during that minute is exponentially more than just like 50 or 100 degrees lower. Like, I don't know the exact chart, but if you get it too hot, the diffusion will it'll be dramatic. So like the guys that that do San Mai, where they say, oh, I just stick it in at like 2,300 degrees or whatever. Like you stick it in there for like 10 minutes and then you force that sucker out. Whereas
so
like
that would be 2,300 would be a high temperature.
I think that's absurd and you should never go that high for anything.
Okay.
But like I would do 2,150
Sure.
to 2,200 and then maybe soak it for like 30 minutes or something.
Okay.
But it's one of those things that if you're willing to go to the level of nerd level here, okay,
Nerddom. Yeah.
okay, I would say, and now see, now I want to do this. This is why I hate coming up with ideas like this. Okay, so now I'm gonna have to do this at some point.
All right.
Okay, so you make a bunch of San Mai, like packets, right?
Okay.
So make like 2x2 squares of San Mai.
Okay.
Okay. And do like half a dozen of them.
Sure.
Okay. And do them all differently. Okay. And then grind a bevel onto it.
Right.
And etch it and see how much. I mean, that's a pretty simple test when it comes down to it.
I would say 1 by 2.
See
1 by 2.
1 by 2? 1 by 2? Okay.
Yeah, I think 1 by 2.
And then you could be able to see the amount of carbon diffusion and like what you're in the boundary zone. So yeah, like do one at 2,150, do one at 2,200, do one at 2,300, and like do like significantly varied soak times on them and see what happens. That's actually, if you're going to be doing San Mai, honestly, hell, the next time I do a San Mai, I think I'm going to do that first. That's a really good experiment.
So just to take a step back, you were talking about like high temperatures versus low temperatures, long soak versus short soak. So what are some examples of high temperatures and low temperatures and long soaks versus short soaks? Like you were saying before, you were saying 2,300 is an ridiculous.
So like there's a lot of very talented, very skilled makers that still forge, as far as I'm concerned, absurdly too hot. Like if you're forging anything in excess of like 2,250 to 2,300 degrees, there's no reason to do it. I mean, unless you like the sparks that are flying fucking everywhere.
Because you're melting the steel?
Yes, I mean, and the grain size is just hilariously overblown and everything. And so you'll see a lot of like old like ABS forum posts. It was all this stuff about doing all this like grain, like thermocycling, grain reduction, and all this different stuff. Okay.
Right.
You don't really need to do so much of that if you don't obliterate the steel beforehand.
Sure.
Right. So like if you're not like, so yes, can you get up to like 2,400 plus, and does the steel turn into putty and you can move it around? Yes, absolutely. But you also need thermal. What? That's what you do?
That when I was on Forge for Fire, that's what I did.
Yeah, but you need to thermocycle the hell out of that thing to get like decent steel that'll hold an edge afterwards. And you couldn't just like make something out of that without anything. It would just it'd be horrific.
Sure.
Whereas if you just lower the temperature a bit, it might be, sure, you might lose a little bit of plasticity, but you're also not, and this is the thing with the stainless, is where there is no fixing the dramatic grain growth in a shop like mine. Like for massive carbide and grain growth, the only way to truly fix it is a mechanical reduction of like 50% in a single heat or something.
Wow.
Or it's something like that.
That's a massive.
So it's like, this is like industrial scale stuff.
Yeah.
So like they can heat it up perhaps hotter than I would when they're like rolling stuff out, because they can roll it out from 1 inch to 1/2 inch in one go.
Right.
So like with the stainless is you never want to get it so hot that you're just destroying the grain, because in some cases, which I know you've seen before, actually it happened when you were here, when I cooked that spot.
Yeah, sadly.
Honestly, one of
Still makes my heart hurt.
One of the worst experiences from start to finish on any stainless build I've ever done, in part, was when you were here. Like,
I'm a
I
jinx.
did that. No, dude, remember? I did that thing where I was trying to be clever and I was trying to like see the varying pressure of like the flow in my can, and I had that like cool like tube
Right.
filled with blue food coloring, and I ended up sucking blue food coloring into the
Oh,
billet.
okay.
And
Right.
then the next day I was screwing around with the forge, and one burner got hotter than the other, and I cooked like a hot spot in
Yeah.
one area, and we forged it out, and like it just like ballooned out, and you could see cracks just under the hot spot of the burner.
Yeah.
I was just like, Jesus. So like, yeah, there our first collaboration billet got one knife. That's actually
Pattern
not
came
true.
out really cool.
Oh, it did come out really cool. It actually got two knives. The second one, do I still have it over here? It's over here somewhere. I actually got it just about finished, and then I was trying to straighten it, and I cracked it in half.
Oh, perfect.
So I think I showed you at the time, or maybe I was too embarrassed.
Yeah.
Uh, but with some of the stainless, the grain growth that occurs is just so dramatic that it's actually visible to the naked eye. Like
Sure.
you can see the crystal structure of the metal, and if you try to actually work it and move it, it just crumbles like blue cheese.
Right. Well, and also, isn't it also with stainless, it's trickier to forge because the chromium content and the high carb, especially if it's a performance stainless like CPM 154, the high chrome or carbon content. Also, those two things work together to shrink kind of the temperature, the I guess the AC between the ACM and melting, right? It makes it
Yeah, yeah.
so it
It's
lowers the melting temperature, which means
yes,
you have to work at kind of a
yeah.
lower controlled temperature.
That's
Anyways,
a lot of people I hear say like, oh, so you're forging stainless. It's got to be really hot, right? I'm like, no.
no.
Like I mean, in some like I just had someone recently say like, oh, I had someone tell me that to forge stainless it needed to be, and it was something in Celsius, and I and I converted it, and it was like 2375. And I'm like, someone's fucking with you, or doesn't know what they're talking about,
Right.
because that's a great way to ruin like $500 worth of steel right there.
Sure. What maximum
Uh,
in Celsius is like 1100, right? Which it comes out to about 2150.
and he said it was like something like it was like 12 or 1300 Celsius or something, and I converted it over. I don't remember exactly what but it was absurdly too
Yeah.
hot. But yeah, I mean, so that's like a lot of people don't realize that there some of the elements that go into stainless make it actually the melting temperature lower in
Right.
the working, and its its window of plasticity
Right.
is a lot narrower. Yeah.
Okay.
And the amount of plasticity it has is significantly less. I think when you're just comparing like 304 to mild steel, it's essentially like it has 60% the plasticity, I believe.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so like you have to work a lot harder to get it to move the same
Okay.
amount.
So it sounds like 410, this is what I'm taking from this. 410 is an ideal
Yeah,
cladding, with or without a nickel shim, but with a nickel shim kind of helps prevent any unnecessary uh carbon migration.
and it adds a nice little shiny element.
Nice shiny element, and then also trying to work at a more reasonable temperature, which you would say is around 2150 Fahrenheit.
Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah. And only like a 10-minute soak, right?
this is
Or
what
no, no,
it
no,
depends.
you were saying at 2150 soak it for like half an hour because it's lower.
Probably.
It's a lower welding.
I think that's what I did last time. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lower
Um,
welding temp, which
but again, I mean, so we're getting into like how big a billet are you doing,
sure.
right?
That's a
I
good
mean,
point.
like the mass of the billet's gonna affect it. What kind of forge you're using? Are you determining your heat? If you're using determining your heat via a thermocouple, do you actually have your billet next to the thermocouple, or is the
Right.
billet on the other side of the heat source from the
Sure.
thermocouples? In which
Right.
case, it's going to be drastically different.
It'd be very different.
Um, and you can have different and if you're doing like a shitty top-down burner style forge, uh, which I know a lot of people use, and I'm gonna shit all over it because it's a horrible design unless you're a farrier. Uh, you're gonna have like, if you have an area that's okay, carbon steel, the heat, the thermal conductivity is fairly forgiving, right?
Okay.
So like, if you have an area that's a lot hotter than the other, when you're forging it out, like you can tell, like this area moves a little bit better, like as
Right.
it cools down. Okay, but the thermal conductivity of stainless is significantly less. So if you overheat a spot, say you're doing your little San Mai billet and you've got it, and like you've got a part of it is like directly under the burner,
Yeah.
you're going to have a drastically different result
Sure.
under that burner spot than a half an inch away. Like it's not going to be like, oh, well, if it heats up there, the heat's going to kind of diffuse through the rest of the piece. Stainless
No.
doesn't work like that. It's not
Right.
going to diffuse nicely throughout the rest of the piece. You're going to get a different result in that hotter area.
Right.
100%.
Which is what happened to that billet, right?
Yes, it did.
When I was there. Sadly.
I think I've got it over there still.
Don't even look at it.
I know.
Does it make you cry a little bit every time you see it?
Oh, this would be good advertising here.
Okay,
I
let's
think
see.
I've showed you this. I think I've showed you this before. I'm going to turn it
Okay.
into a sculpture. This is my last. This was about like last March, I think. This is a solid $500 at least of raw material cost,
Okay.
and I don't know how many hours, but like in terms of just me doing other stuff around the shop, like about 2 days worth of work in cleaning, prepping, forging. You ready for this? All right.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
so this is not a D-lam. That's a crack
Right.
down the middle of the CPM 154. Okay, that's where it's visible. Okay, there's little microfractures running all the way through this thing.
Yeah.
So
Oh my God.
I finished this out on this side here and on this
Yeah.
side here, and I etched it and I polished it, and you can see the grain of everything. You probably can't see it like on this here,
Yeah,
but
sure,
like
sure.
you can
Right.
see the grain structure of everything. And
Right.
I'm gonna make like a little sculpture. I think I might cut it down this way, and
Will it be
someone
a business card
suggested I
holder?
could make, or like bookends,
Bookends.
like bookends, right? And
Oh
then
my
someone's like,
God.
well, someone asked, is like, if you could you make another one for another bookend? I'm like, I'm not doing this again on purpose. Like, this was devastating.
Yeah. Oh my God.
But in fact, I tried to do a really heavy etch on it, thinking
Okay.
that I could have like cool like texture, but the grain is so bad that it actually crumbled out when I tried to etch it really heavily.
Oh wow.
But
So then you spent more time refinishing it so you
no,
can
I didn't, and
Okay.
that's why it's still sitting here, is because I didn't do that.
Not
But
yet. You're going to.
here's the problem: if I do cut it in half and make it bookends, that's more surface area to finish. Damn it! The whole idea was that this side and this side were the raw billet, and then this
Right.
side and this side were finished out.
Oh boy.
But so I keep joking about how it's just a sculpture now, but I mean it was, oh man, like that sucked. And what made it suck even more is that the lamination went fine. Like
Yeah.
I laminated the billet together and it was great. I didn't have enough time to draw it out that night, so I took it out of the canister and I looked at it. I'm like, awesome. I set it down. The next morning, I heated up the forge, stuck the billet in, and I must have been screwing around with my thermocouple placement or something. And I looked over and I see like 22 something, and I'm like, fuck. And I run over and like I look in there, and like I was running the forge off a different thermocouple rather than the one that I should have been. And I mean, and once it overheats, you can't just be like, oh, I'll lower the temperature back down and it'll be fine. Like the damage occurred while the temperature was raised.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's game over. And I did like one squish and you could just see the end just come apart.
Right.
And so all I did was forge it out dimensional and then just set it or throw it on the ground. I may have thrown it at the time.
Sure. You threw that giant piece of hot steel across the shop?
I'm maybe just down on the ground or something.
Damn it.
Yeah.
I've been I really struggle with perfectionism, and I've been trying to reaffirm myself that it's okay that mistakes happen. It's just important that you pay attention and learn from them. Otherwise, you're likely to do it again. And so my
Hmm.
little mantra has been mistakes pave the road to mastery. Um, and so maybe
You're gonna print that on a shirt, right?
that's a is that a paver stone on your road to mastery?
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
It's heavy on your heart and your wallet.
And the thing is that it had probably been 3 years since I'd done something like that.
Wow.
So like
Since
the
I was
last
there.
time since you were there, that was the last time was when you were there. Like honestly, like it hadn't
Oh
happened
my
since.
god.
Um, and
I'm laughing to
so
hide the pain, by the
okay,
way.
so now this is why you can see this here. Okay,
Oh,
so
yeah.
like on my forge in the back here,
Yep.
I have 4 hard mounted thermocouples
I'm proud of you. I'm jealous.
and a box underneath with 4 inputs, and I potentially within reach of my old controller. So I can
Sure.
potentially have 7 thermocouple inputs in there. I'm not
Okay.
fucking around anymore.
You're not
I
letting that
know
happen
the
again.
temperature inside there in every zone
Right.
wherever I want. And some of the
Okay.
thermocouples are long enough that I can actually like loosen it up and like put it further into
Oh,
the forge and pull it back
sure.
out again. Like
Yeah,
I'm not screwing around anymore
that's good.
because I do not want this to happen again.
Right. So you were talking about the grain structure, and you were talking also like is the only way to reduce the grain after you maybe blow it up at because you've been at forge welding temperatures is through reduction. Is there any way to thermal cycle it to help reduce that grain size?
To a certain degree,
Okay,
yes. And you can still normalize. Like you can still do, um, uh, you can still get consistency throughout the billet.
okay,
So like, or even the blade. So say like you're just forging the tip out. Well,
yeah,
during the act of forging the tip out, you're changing like the crystalline structure of the material at the tip.
sure,
But so that's why you put it back in and you can normalize it again and you get everything to be the same. Um, so there's some of it can be done, but it's much more limited to what you can do.
okay,
And so that's why if everything is just done at a significantly lower temperature, you preempt any of that happening.
right, okay. Yeah, I guess for a long time, especially when I was first starting to dry weld or fluxless weld, um, soak times and stuff like that always freaked me out. But now talking to you actually honestly right now, and I don't have you'll hate me for this. I don't have a thermocouple in my forge.
I
I
know
know
that, and
we've
it
talked
does
about
make me
this.
angry.
But I'm when I was at Dragon's Breath, I we did have a thermocouple there, and I was running it where I would normally try to run it, and I was running it actually around 2200 degrees.
Well,
And that's
if you're doing a Venturi,
yeah,
like a solid reducing atmosphere with a Venturi burner is pretty much 2150.
yeah. Okay,
Like it's hard to get it hotter than that with a solid reducing atmosphere in a
I
Venturi
got you.
setup. Yeah.
And a solid reducing atmosphere. I mean, what kind of if you were gonna take a look at the flame coming out of the front of the forge, what does that look like?
Like
Pretty soft.
rather than shooting out, it's like
Yeah,
billowing. It's got more of
soft
a curve. Yeah.
soft flames billowing
Because
out. Okay,
it's not seeking out oxygen aggressively. Like
okay,
just it's not hunting for oxygen to burn. It's just kind of it's burning up most of what it has, and so there's a little bit of excess gas that's just kind of
okay,
lofting out.
okay.
And yes, it does have more of a blue tint to it if
Right.
you're in. I mean, you have to have like doors
Lower
closed and
light.
lights down and everything, but it
Yeah,
does
sure.
have more of a blue color to it. Yeah,
Right. Okay. We got another question for you. You ready?
sure.
This is from Jeremy Bartlett. He says, "My question for Will is: are there any steels in particular that go really well together, that have good contrast and have similar heat treat recipes?" I'm guessing because I think these people know that you work with stainless, and so if
Yeah.
so,
I mean, there's a reason why um, Devin Thomas started using AEBL and CPM 154. There's a reason why Damascus Steel's chemical composition is identical to AEBL and CPM 154.
Sure.
I mean, maybe, can you mix other things together? Yes. Could you even get a better performance? Yes. But you're not going to get the contrast. The magic is the 4% molybdenum in CPM 154. That 4% molybdenum makes it stay shiny when you etch it.
Right.
There's one combination I've always wanted to try is using CPM 20V, which has a huge amount of chromium in it, which could potentially work similar, but it's also hilariously expensive. So, like, I mean, and we're talking like on a comparative scale here. You have like what would be a bar of like 1080 is like $7. The same bar of AEBL might be $12.
Right.
And then the same bar of CPM 154 is $30.
Sure.
And then the same bar of 20V is probably $50. So it's like, at what point is it just kind of like the material cost of this is just so silly that like even like the stress involved in like I feel comfortable enough now, like right now, that if I were given like a stack of, that's really obnoxious. Sorry about that.
Is that an Amber Alert?
Yes, it is. Missing elderly.
Oh, that's a Silver Alert.
Silver Alert. Okay. Oh, is the silver?
Some of those, yeah. Hope everybody. This goes. I hope everybody's okay.
Yes, me too. What was I saying?
You're wanting to do
so
some
like,
fuck off forge welding.
So like, I feel confident enough, like right now,
sure,
especially with my new forge setup, where I'm confident the temperatures. Like, you could give me anything. Like, I could take like Van X, Lmax, like whatever you want, and I could get it to stick, and I could draw it out. But the question is, what's the contrast going to be? And if you don't have really good contrast, why are you making it out of damascus? Just make it out of monosteel. So, and the more heavily you alloy something, typically the smaller a range of plasticity it has, the shorter the temperature range of plasticity, and the overall plasticity is going to be less. It's like, I think that Cosmo Knives in Canada is right across the border from Niagara Specialty Metals, and like he's made stainless Damascus out of S110V and S90V, right? I mean, that's batshit crazy, but neither of those steels goes dark. So like, it's really cool. I love the fact that he did it, right? But it's like you can get like a textural contrast, like a topographical, but you're not going to get either of them to go black.
Right.
So like I said, it's absolutely awesome that he did it. I love it. But why? I mean, other than
like
it just
welding
being like
1080 and 1075.
Yeah, I mean, like it's as far as I'm concerned, it's an epic flex. Like, I want to do it just so I can say I can do it. But there's no reason to regularly do it to make something out of it.
Yeah.
So the short answer is, I mean, honestly, when it comes down to it, this is the easy answer. Okay, if there were a better combination of steels with better performance and color, Damascus Steel would be using it.
Sure, they would make it, and they would use it.
I mean, bless their hearts, owned by Sandvik. Like, they would be using it
for sure. All right. David Singer has a question, who is actually also a student of JD Smith's. He's asking, what can you tell us about your stainless Damascus setup and prep? And I think you've touched on it a little bit before about flattening and cleaning. But what else can you share with us? Because like you said before, there's maybe 4 people in the United States who are really doing this at a meaningful level. And And so I understand
Um,
if you are limited in what you wish to share. Your trade secrets.
I don't know. This is where I'm kind of torn because like there are things that that people have helped me with in the past,
Sure.
but at the same time, I feel like for example, like the times that like James Binion, bless him, has like felt pity on me and like told me something is often because like I've tried and like epically failed a few times, and I'm just like,
Please help me.
dude, I've tried this way, this way, this way, and this way. Can you give me some advice? And like, and he'll definitely do it. But I think part of the reason why he'll do that is because like I'm genuinely trying. Like
Yeah,
I'm
you
not just
spent
trying to ask for like
hundreds
a
of
free
dollars
handout.
on
Yeah,
materials. You spent
yeah. Like so,
hours and days of
like, and there
time.
and there
Yeah,
and there are people that have reached out to me.
sure.
There's like a guy in South Africa who reached out to me. One of someone that's a friend of Neil's,
Okay.
and uh,
Niels
Niels
Vandenberg.
Vandenberg,
Yeah.
not the man. Do those two people look any more different? The
No.
Neil and Niels. Um, or maybe he was a friend of Henning's.
Okay.
Uh, that was like, dude, I spent like $5,000 on material. These are all the different ways I've tried it. Like, I just cannot get this to work. And
Sure.
then, and I kind of just would like, you're on the right track. And so like, I'm totally down
Right.
to assist someone who is like committed to doing it. But there's also people that have like kind of like I was 10 years ago that have made like one Damascus billet, like random pattern, and they're like, how do I make stainless? And there's this voice inside my head that's being like, fuck off. Like, you're not ready.
Sure.
And honestly, if you don't have a hydraulic press or a hammer, you
Power
literally
hammer.
have no a power hammer.
Yeah.
Power hammer, you don't have any business doing it because
Sure.
it's. I'm not saying it's impossible. Um, I'm pretty sure. I think it was Michael Walker, the the folding knife guy, the guy that like
Okay.
the AKI
Yeah.
folding knives. He makes like
Yeah.
amazing folders. I was
Yep.
talking to him one time, and like back in like the late '80s or something, like he's made some stainless Damascus with by hand with a hammer, but it's like he's like it was horrible. Like
Sure.
it was. He did it a couple times and was kind of like, nah, maybe someday someone will be making this more of this in a way that I can buy it, but like I don't
Sure.
want to do this again.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, I mean, yes, it's possible, but you're gonna like blow out your arm, and it would just be generally horrible.
Right.
I mean, the reason I have this massive 75-ton hydraulic press right here is because my home built, I think it's a Claiborne style like H frame press that I made
Yeah.
it was literally pulling itself apart.
Right.
Like I had
Forging the stainless.
forging the stainless. I mean, I remember I think it was something Mike Quisenberry one time. And I was like,
Okay.
how often do you redress the dies on your hydraulic press? And he's like, I think I did it 10 years ago. And I'm like, I have to do it like every 3 to 6 months, right? I mean, it's just like the frame is just fighting itself because it's
Right.
so much more force is going into moving the material.
Right.
And like if like carbon steel, like say you have like your square dies and you
Yep.
just want to forge like on the corner of the die, right? You kind of pinch something out.
Yeah.
Like it's fine. You do it with stainless and the whole thing just is like, "Argh!" Like it
Wow.
just like it'll pinch down, but then everything you get the side load and all this stuff that starts happening and just
Yeah.
like I've
A lot of
just it
a lot
just
of
it,
bad
it
stuff.
literally is like destroying the press. And I was like,
Yeah.
if like I need so I've had to rebuild the structure on it a few times to reinforce it and everything. Um, and then the last time that I actually forged out some carbon steel Damascus, I was like, this is like it squishes like putty. Like this is ridiculous. Like why am I doing this to myself?
Okay, so clean materials, a match, a set of materials that will go together, a press or a hammer, forge. What do you say? Temperature controlled, not
You have to have temperature control. Like you
right,
at least have to have a thermocouple in there to to be able to tell what you're doing.
right.
Um, uh, I wish it would be state secrets. I would have to be a state in myself, though. Um, uh,
Your state
I
of
mean,
mind.
this is where I'm not sure like what I should say, because um, there are some people that have laid claim to things. Like there's some people that have the patent on essentially doing what I'm doing, but just with titanium, right? But their
I got
patent is strictly titanium. It only works for
It's on
titanium.
the record.
Yeah, but like anyone can look up the patent. Like it's on
Sure.
titanium. Um, but it's essentially the same technique. I mean, uh, damascus steel uses a nitrogen purge around powdered metal in a giant sintered canister.
Yeah.
Um,
Isostatic pressing, right?
um, they, I don't think they're doing. They might do a hot isostatic press. Um, uh, they might do that now. I'm honestly not sure. That is a potential way to do it, but I mean,
Sure.
unless
Which
you're
is like a heated chamber. It's a chamber with material heated
yeah,
and
a
purged
hot
and compressed.
isostatic press is essentially a combination between a kiln and a pressure chamber. So you actually have like so you fill the chamber, like the elements heat up the material, and then
Yeah.
you pump a gas in at such a high pressure that it actually puts a discernible force on
Right.
what's in there, like a hydrostatic force on the part. And so
Wow.
yeah, you can sinter stuff that way. You could have like a bunch of powdered metal in a canister and put it into a hot isostatic press, and you can combine it together. And I think you can either use argon or nitrogen or different things like that.
Yeah.
But I also know of at least two makers that do nothing other than just MIG weld the shit out of the outside of it.
Wow. Okay.
And I mean, they must have a certain amount of material loss on the outsides.
I would guess.
But I mean, but it works.
Yeah.
I mean, I was told once by someone that where I guess that they did like a purged canister for their initial weld, but if they ever did a restack, they just MIG welded it.
Really?
And I was just like, yeah, sure, you can do that, but I would rather purge canister every single time
Sure.
to make sure that it's perfect every single time.
And
I mean, there's
if you're gonna MIG weld the entire outside, why wouldn't you just put it in a can? Like
I
even
don't know.
just a mild steel can on the
I don't
outside.
know. Well, I mean, Kyle Royer, I've seen some of his little Instagram videos. It looks like he pretty much cans everything now.
Sure.
He just uses mild steel and he just cans it, and I
Yep.
mean, it just ensures that there's no problem every
Sure.
single time.
Yep.
There's a Swiss dude who's been doing some cool Mcrae and titanium stuff, and in a vacuum kiln, a vacuum forge. I mean, if you treat it like Mcrae and you simply set the weld in the forge, once the weld is set, you don't need a reducing atmosphere anymore. You don't need a
Right.
canister anymore. The moment the forge weld is set, the diffusion occurs, you no longer need the atmosphere anymore.
Interesting.
So, like if you're in a canister, you only need the canister to be intact for essentially your first round of forging.
Right.
After that, your canister can tear open. It doesn't matter.
Right.
Or if you're Steve Schwartzer and you've like perfectly lined your canister, you can just simply break the end off and gently have your material float out the end.
Yeah. I love
Which
seeing those.
I have a collection of the few times it's actually happened.
Okay. He's very proud of them. He's going to retrieve them right now.
I have a stack of them.
Okay.
Right, where you actually have a can.
Oh wow.
That like you just like the handle was attached on this side, and I just kind of like I got it to break off, and then the billet just falls right out. I mean, this is best case
massive
scenario.
billet.
I'm not sure which one of this was for. This might have been for. This is a pretty big billet. I was screwing around with some large 304, 316 billets about 6 months ago, and I actually did a 45-pound billet.
Oh my god!
It was stupid. It was never doing it again. It's not worth it.
Yeah, you got your arm day in, I guess.
It was ridiculous. But you like with the canister, you either want it to completely stick all the way around, or completely fall off all the way around. What you don't want is for it to partially stick, which unfortunately is what happens about 60% of the time. Ed Braun has been sending me his old heat treating foil.
Okay.
And so I make the canister, and then I put the heat treating foil that's been used, so it's pre-oxidized, on all the faces, and then put the canister together. And I don't know if it's just my big press, but on the top and bottoms, it's still welding the can on.
Sure. Oh, wow.
So, which makes me think, why am I cleaning all this material so well and going through all this shit if I can have this layer of oxidized stainless that's forge welding?
Right.
And it's on the outside of the billet. So arguably it's cooling off the fastest as the dies hit.
Right.
But the billet that I just did, I could not get the top and bottom off. I had to rip the sides of the can off. And I had fully oxidized heat treat wrap on the top and bottom.
Fun.
No, it's not. Because you have to decide, am I going to do this hot? Well, the material will tear easier, but I look like a crazy person sitting on the shop floor, squatting down, trying to peel off this hot can, or am I going to wait for it to cool where I can chisel it off, where it's harder to get off, but I'm not like dancing around a 20-pound chunk of glowing steel. In this case, I let it cool off. But in other cases, I've just been like, no, I want to continue doing this right now, and I'm just going to peel the sucker off. Also, this is just my own personal, I hate angle grinders because they make a huge mess, right?
They do.
And I don't want to. Exactly. And so I now have my nice little table, my little stand here with the post vise. This is going to be mobile enough that I can potentially muscle this into the grinding room. And
no, I got a solution for you. Okay, ready?
All right.
You have your grinder set up with contact wheel, whatever it is, and a nice 36 grip belt.
Okay.
You wrap with the spent foil in your can and whatever else you do. You get to a certain point where you're ready to take it off. You just take it in, and with the tongs in one hand and holding on to the handle with other tongs or something, you just zip the corners. You do opposing corners.
It's the corners. The corners are always the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. So zip the opposing corners. So kitty corner, and maybe that'll help that get off quicker. I'm always trying to tell Will how he should be doing things. Tons of unsolicited advice from me.
No, dude. I'm gonna need to send you a pair of chopsticks because you gave me two good pieces of advice on two separate occasions in the same week about centering
full of ideas.
Centering the brand on the table. So set up your table and then brand the table so I know exactly where the mark is to line it all up. And then,
by the way, that table looked great. It was beautiful.
Okay, this is what happens when your friends know that you're super extra and you like fancy stuff. So I gave it to my buddy who works on wooden sailboats, right?
Okay.
Yep. And because I have a table saw, but it's buried away. So I didn't want to I'd have to move a whole bunch of stuff to get it out. So I was like, dude, can you just make this little platform to go on the arbor press out of just some junk Baltic birch plywood or something? And he's just and he messages me later and he's like, you're gonna love this. and I got to see it, and he made it out of scrap teak.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And I was like, oh, awesome. But then you suggested doing the rest of the chopsticks, and I think that's gonna make it too. Having the little rest is gonna be really cool. So you've given me two good ideas on the chopsticks. So
that's what I'm here for.
I feel like you're obligated to get upset now.
Okay, I have two more questions for you from the audience. One is from Jorian Nippenberg. He says, I don't have a question, but I'd like to say thank you to both Will and Mariko for their time and effort to share knowledge and to help us all get better. I'm looking forward to the interview. And then he actually edited it and added a question. He says, let's add a question. He said, let's ask a question anyways. He says, how do you control grain size and reduce chromium carbide formation in heat treatment after being at forge welding temperatures for such long periods? I feel like we kind of touched on that
Yeah, and it's pretty much
already.
keeping
So
those
if you
forge
want to
welding
summarize,
temperatures
yeah,
as low as possible.
right,
And then, I mean, and then when I'm actually forging a blade out,
yeah,
I do decrease the temperature significantly.
okay,
And so like when I'm forging a blade out, like I'm forging it around like 2000 and then start creeping it lower and lower and lower
sure,
until I'm finally around like I can do some of the final details around like 1750,
yeah,
uh, which is um, I had material successfully move as low as 1500,
sure,
but I've also not been brave enough to see how far I can push it that low,
sure,
especially because it would be so localized.
right.
Like it would only be like a few hammer blows in a particular area.
And,
Um, if you had like a solid rolling mill setup, I could see being able to almost perfectly reduce grain size consistently at different temperatures as you vary going down. Um, so, I mean, I'll openly admit there is there is definitely some variation in the microstructure of my blades, just due to the nature of the material and
right,
trying to forge them out. But I've never found a significant uh, flaw in terms of like having one area of the blade like harder or softer than another,
I got you.
if that makes any sense. I mean,
Yeah,
I mean, part of getting this new forge setup is in part trying to reduce all those variables and
sure,
trying to find out like what is the minimum soak time that I can achieve to get enough plasticity to start moving the material,
right,
so that uh, I mean, so like we discussed earlier. In short, there's not a lot you can do once all the damage has occurred. So you want to try to reduce the variables as much as possible going in. So I want to find out like what's the minimum soak time that I need, the minimum temperature needed to move the material,
right.
so that in the end I get the best results possible.
Okay, I like that. Is there? This isn't part of the question, but I feel like I've read somewhere where there's like this property of metal where if you reduce it a certain amount, you can continue to reduce it without necessarily doing damage to the material. As you get into colder and colder temperatures, hence some of like the cold forging you see Japanese bladesmiths doing, where they will start from ripping ass hot and they'll cold forge the material after, and
You
that
mean
might
you
be
mean
because,
you mean in a particular thermal cycle?
yeah, just like in one heat,
Yeah. Well,
in
part
a
of that is
single heat.
because if you're not active quenching it,
Yeah,
then yeah, like it's not undergoing a phase change, or the phase change is happening very, very slowly,
sure.
right? So I mean, um, one of the problems is the stainless is also air hardening. So like you have to be aware of the fact that if it gets too, if you essentially once you're at a black heat, you're it's starting to undergo phase change.
Right.
Um, where it's like with carbon steel, if your martensite start is only like 400 degrees, well, 400 to 1,000 is still a black heat. You got plenty of room
Yeah.
to do what we would consider almost cold forging because it's black,
Right.
but it's still, I mean, your phase change hasn't occurred yet. So with the stainless, your window again is just it's narrower.
Yeah.
Um, but and the plasticity just becomes to the point where, I mean, if you have a 200-pound hammer that isn't moving the material, even though the material is still slightly glowing,
Mm-hmm.
like how big a hammer are we going to get? I mean, I
Right.
have full radius dies on this thing, and 200
Yeah.
pounds at full force isn't moving it an eighth of an inch when it's only a quarter of an inch thick. Like, it's
Time to put it back in the forge, it sounds like.
yeah. But I mean, but yes, there, and I'm sure that if you really want to get into the physics of it too, there's a certain amount of the kinetic energy going into it,
Yeah.
and then the actual physical reduction of the material and the movement of the material is creating heat, right? So like,
Right.
if you are very consistently working the material, you can be pushing it further because you're almost kind of like, you're almost like holding the plasticity of the material at a particular state for
Sure.
longer, like as you're working it. I mean, it's definitely with the stainless, it takes longer for everything to break down, right? So like for everything to dissolve. So your initial soak times are usually longer than with carbon steel. But once that's happened and everything's dissolved into solution and you're working it, then yeah, it's actually pretty surprising how cool you can work it.
Right.
But you're only working it that cool because it has been hotter than that in the same, without having undergoing the phase change again. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
So like if you just took it from cold and you heated it up to 1200 degrees and you tried to forge it, it would probably just crack. It would just, or it wouldn't move, or it would break. But if you have heated it up, dissolved all the chromium and the carbides and everything, and you're using forging it out, and then you're allowing it to cool down as you're working it, you can probably get it to move around at like 1200 degrees, simply because it hasn't undergone a full phase change yet. It had like a full cycle hasn't occurred.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I can almost feel some metallurgists being like, that's not true.
they're out there
Or
cringing
what you
really
are
hard.
saying might physically be true, but the way you described it is wrong, or something. I don't know.
All right, we got one last one from Dry Knives. He says, "What is the most important thing when it comes to making stainless steel mosaic Damascus? Why doesn't why doesn't your welds pop when forging on the bias? So what's keeping your material together
All right.
when you start
I
doing
was
those
actually,
crazy movements?"
this is actually a really good question, and I'm
Okay,
glad it was asked because this is something that Salem and I have talked about before.
sure.
And we both kind of discovered it independently. I'm not sure how many other people do this. I think you and I maybe have talked about this before, but
Okay,
it's something called aging the weld.
sure.
Okay.
We have
So,
talked
and
about this.
yeah, so it's something where this is the benefit of the lower temperature.
Yeah.
So if you do a lower temperature for a longer period of time, you're not getting as dramatic a diffusion in terms of depth of diffusion, but you're almost ensuring that the diffusion that you have is solid.
Right.
So I know for years there were arguments between mastersmiths and other makers about like how much reduction is needed to ensure a weld,
Sure.
right? Okay, and it's not
50%,
a
right?
it's not a simple answer. Okay, it might be 50% if you've got a 36 grit finish on the pieces,
Right.
right? Because you have significantly more surface area that needs to be overcome for the pieces to bond.
Right.
But like I said, like Owen Wood showed, like he could surface grind pieces, stack them up, and maybe move them 2 to 5% by hitting
Yeah.
them with a
Yeah.
large mallet, a hand hammer
Hand hammer.
on an
Yeah.
anvil, and
Yeah.
he can set the bond. Or in cases of like Mcrae, where you're doing torque plates, I mean, you're essentially ensuring a bond with, I don't even know if it's a measurable percentage, because you're allowing the natural thermal expansion of the material to be the pressure against the plates, and that's enough to get it to bond.
Right.
So I know some of the Mcrae people don't really trust a Mcrae bond fully until they've done a 50% reduction.
Okay.
And so like they won't say twist it.
Oh, really?
Until they've done like 50%. I could be wrong. I think I've heard that before from some Mcrae people.
I'm curious to see that now. If somebody did like a 1/2 inch by 1/2 inch Mcrae billet, fused it, and then just went straight into twisting, what would happen?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I think this is again something that Binion has said, where ideally, if you can just have like one layer of atoms cross between the two materials,
yeah,
okay, and it's a solid, consistent jump of electrons, okay, consistently, but as minimal as possible, and you just stretch and increase the surface area of that bond, then you have the two distinct colors, the two distinct alloys that are solidly bonded together, and you don't have any variation between the two. That's ideal. But trying to work out exactly what that is, and even if you get that, even if you accomplish that in your initial lamination, how do you continually accomplish that in subsequent heatings and annealings and forgings and everything else? Because that's the whole, it's gonna, more and more diffusion is gonna occur. What was this question? What did we start with this?
It was about solid welds.
Oh yes, okay.
And being able to trust forging it on the bias.
All right, okay, I remember now. So, because this is something that Mike Quisenberry has talked about before too. Like when he does some of his cool integral pieces, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of those integral pieces he does are like the blade is like a stacked mosaic, right? So I mean, like he can stack all those pieces up for his things. And I mean, he's not doing a 50% reduction in order to set that weld. But as long as everything is clean and stacked and all the prep work is done right, the temperature is right. I mean, I don't know exactly what he does, but I would guess like 5 to 10% of a squish, and he can get the weld to set. And I don't know if he does this, but it's something Salem and I have talked about, where it's like once you get the weld to set, like you do that squish, then walk away, leave it for 30 minutes at like 2100.
At the same temperature that you initially set the weld from.
Well, I mean, yeah, but I mean that's just because I tend to forge weld at a lower temperature anyway. But but even if you're no, not even if you're forge welding at a higher temperature, because you just shouldn't be forge welding at a higher temperature. So I'm not going to encourage that bad behavior. Yeah, I mean, so I've had when I do like a feather stack. Let's see if I can get like, okay, so like I've got this slice of stainless feather here, right? Okay, so this was probably like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's say this was 5 pieces,
right?
That were probably let's call them an inch, but they probably were less than an inch. Sorry for that weird noise.
You're fine. Will is dropping rulers across the shop.
And so it's 4 inches tall now.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would be willing to bet that they weren't even an inch. That they were probably like 3/4 of an inch.
Sure.
So this thing may have been 4.5 to 5 inches tall.
Yeah.
And then I squished it and feathered it, and then stuck it back together again. So we're talking like around a 15 to 20% reduction, and then I feathered it.
Yep.
So I was completely confident with the bond at that point. And I mean, if anything is going to tear apart the layers, it's when you're driving a wedge down the top.
Yeah.
In fact, there's a lot of even like really experienced guys that do feathers. They'll MIG weld the outsides just to
keep
have
the big fat weld on the outside.
just to ensure it.
Yeah.
I now just as like, even though no one ever sees it, I think I've taken a couple pictures. It's like a personal like just flex for myself, just to make myself feel cool. Like I purposely remove all canister and all weld and just have my little stainless stack, and I just tack a little bar handle onto it, and it's just naked as can be, and I go in and I feather that sucker where there's nothing around it. And this is, as far as I'm concerned, if I've gotten to this point and any of those welds are too weak to handle it, then
you don't want to end the end product anyways.
Yeah, like I've already failed at that point.
Right.
So that's it's a test of the material in the welds.
Sure.
But I would say that especially a lot of Salem's welds. I mean, Salem is doing some crazy stuff where he's almost like butt welding stuff together, right?
Sure. Yep.
Like not even doing a lap, but just like butt welding and then squishing it, and then the weld is being set by it squishing together. Right. But then you just give it a nice long, you age the weld, and you allow enough diffusion bonding to occur, and I mean, it's fine. I mean, I have an ongoing argument with Tom Ward about whether or not like one of our like mosaic pieces or like a feather would survive the ABS Mastersmith performance test. He thinks it would just snap at a weld. Sure. Okay, I 100% disagree with him. Okay, I have never had any of my Damascus break on a weld.
Right.
Like I've cracked plenty of stuff trying to straighten it. It's never on a weld line, ever. Right? I mean, would you agree? I mean, when you crack stuff, does it ever crack on a weld line?
No.
Yeah. So I mean,
I'm doing a butt welded billet. My little micro billets are little butt welded billets.
Yeah. So I mean, as long as you're forging and thermocycling and aging the welds and doing everything, I mean, it should essentially be homogeneous.
Yeah.
Like
and you should be able to move it in any direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, obviously, you're working within the optimal heat range. Once you start getting below, like when he's talking about forging stainless on the bias, if you start doing that at too low of a temperature, or you've overheated the material, like stuff like that can cause failures. Or you think it would still,
as long as the bond is solid. It's been actually almost over 2 years since I did a Seraphim billet. Yeah. And it's actually one of those weird things where I found that, okay, so I started with the AEBL and 304 because I didn't know of another material that I could forge other than the stainless AEBL that could for like edge holding stuff. The CPM 154 attempts that were miserable and destroyed hundreds of dollars worth of material every time. So until I figured that out, I came up with the pattern that had the 304 in it, but the 304 was away from the edge. Yeah. So like it was like form and function went together there.
Sure.
But I've since found that, I mean, those materials are very, very different and do not like to play together, especially in bold sections. So a lot of my early failures weren't from what I thought they were. They were actually because those two materials
just don't play nice.
So drastically different from each other. Yeah. Even though you can forge them together fairly easily, that I actually am much more confident forging like the AEBL CPM 154 mix than I am the 304 mix. Because the 304 doesn't phase change, it doesn't move, it doesn't have the same. With the ABL CPM 154, you have like, they are going to move slightly different from one another, but they're going to consistently move slightly different as they're going. Whereas the 304 is going to maybe have some plasticity up at these higher temperatures, but then it's not going to get softer and more malleable or harder and less malleable at nearly the same rate as the ABL does.
Sure.
So like it has actually narrower forging windows.
Wow. I did not realize that.
Together. And because I had some weird billet failures a number of times that I could not figure out, and it was actually happening not during the forging, but during the cooling of the billet.
Okay.
Like it was actually tearing itself apart. Probably where we're going with this again. But even in those cases, the cracking or the billet failures that occurred happened like within the ABL due to some sort of thermal effect. It was
Right.
never at the lamination. So once the weld is set and I start drawing it out, I feel confident doing whatever I want with it. I'll
Interesting.
twist it, I'll forge it on the bias, I'll forge it on edge. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And I haven't had any problems with that. The last Seraphim billet that I forged out, other than this lovely monster right here. So these are both from the ends.
A little bit higher.
So
There
these
you
are
go.
both from end cuts. The shape is slightly different, but they're both nicely centered.
Sure.
And it's nice and symmetrical.
That's great.
So, and this is the critical part, is these loops on the ends here.
Sure.
It was probably 2 years ago, and I thought I'd set the weld, and then I moved over to the power hammer, and I went to draw the billet out, and the thicker ABL section just sheared.
Oh,
Like it started moving faster than the layered area.
I remember.
And so like 3/4 of it just separated, and I was just like, screw that. And I haven't even done a Seraphim billet again since, because I was just so pissed.
Right.
So there, I've already shared at least $1,000 worth of material loss with you just in 2 little anecdotes. Like, and that's like just the tip of the iceberg.
Right.
But the thing is, with stuff like that, like, so there's still a lot of material there.
Yeah.
But that big 3/7/8 of a billet that's 304 ABL that's not blade material now.
Sure.
So like it gets stored, and for maybe I'll make jewelry out of this someday, or a hilt or a guard or something.
You'll find a use for it somewhere.
There's a lot of boxes of that.
Yeah.
A lot of boxes.
Yeah. The reason we came up, or we started talking about that before, is because I think I randomly called you, or you called me, and we were talking, and I was like, hey, I got a question for you. And I told you that I had started letting my billets soak for long periods of time. And I was like, what are your thoughts on that? Is that a bad idea? I feel like, because part of me was like, I think I'm cooking my steel and I'm ruining it. But
as long as it's not too hot, then no.
I always forget that I do a lot of my forge welding at that lower temperature at 2100 degree, and my forging, honestly.
Yeah.
So,
but there's the thing, even with the carbon steel, like even if you were soaking for a long time and you were kind of blowing the grain up a little bit, when you actually make it into a knife, you're going to fix it.
Yeah. Yeah, especially carbon steel. Right.
Yeah.
I think that's it for questions. I can't think of anything else right now. We've done almost 3 hours. So I commend you for hanging out, and the 4 people that are still here watching. Thank you everybody for hanging out with us. Thank you to the super sponsors. Will, here, I'm gonna pop up your knife that's in the calendar, in the Artisans of Steel calendar again. So this is a Seraphim blade. And yeah, you can see how those beautiful loops come down close to the edge, but not quite to the edge. And I love the side-by-side photos that you do, because they look like a pair of angel wings.
Yeah, that's where the name the Seraphim came from, is after I'd done the picture like that. And like I almost felt kind of silly for a while continuing to take images of knives and putting them back to back. It's kind of like, great, you get to see both sides, but it doesn't have the same effect. Like, it's not.
No. Sure,
the wings. I think it'd be really cool to get T-shirts made that had the wings like that on the back.
I 100% am on board with that.
I've tried to come up with a couple designs. I need to talk to Neil and talk to his people, because he's got the coolest T-shirts, and he's got like people printing them out.
Right.
All these cool designs.
Yeah.
But and also because, as I'm sure most people know, this is like the first podcast interview I've done. So like 90% of the people have no idea what I look like.
Right.
So I've been to events where I'm just like chatting with people, and then 10 minutes into the conversation, they're like, "Oh, you're the artificery," and the conversation just starts over again because like they realize.
Right.
My personal favorite is actually meeting Ashley Childs at Blade West because I walked
Just
up and
this
introduced
last year, right?
myself. This is like 3 months ago or
Okay.
something, and she kind of just sat there and her mouth was kind of open, and she was like, "I thought you were like in your 70s."
I mean, to be honest, you are like a 70-year-old man
That's
in a
fine.
33-year-old's body.
Sure. But like she thought I was really old for some reason, and she's just
Right.
like, "What?
Yeah.
You're younger than I am." Sorry to call you out like that. But I don't know. I just thought it was really funny because it's like she had absolutely no idea what it looked like because
Right.
my page is just pictures of my work, and
Yep.
I don't interview people and talk into my phone like you do every week.
That's true. Well, thank
Not
you
that we
so much.
don't always love looking at you, but
No,
that's how you
I
see
hate
you
looking
anyway.
at myself. Well, you can find Will on Instagram. It's the Artificery with the underscore in between the and Artificery. Let's see. Artificery is spelled Artificery, but I will also have a link in all the information and everything that we get this out on. I think that's it. You killed it. This is going to be a hard act to follow, buddy. You shared a lot of really good information, and actually it's
Are
inspired
you
me
gonna
to.
keep everyone else captive for 3 hours?
Probably not. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. I mean,
But you've
honestly, this
definitely
is like our typical phone call
on
conversation.
it. I
Like,
mean, it kind of
so
is.
yeah.
We call each other, and it's like we're like coworkers, but we're a 2.5
I
hour
always
air
I always
flight from
have
each
like
other.
super high like step count, like when I talk to you, because I
Because
tend to
you're just pacing.
pace when I'm talking, and so I'll be just like working on something and like walking in circles, and like I'll hit like 10,000 steps that day just because I was like talking with you on the phone.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, it's good for exercise.
Right on, bud. Well, I look forward to hanging out with you sometime, hopefully soon. And otherwise, this was awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you again to all the super sponsors. You can find Will on Instagram again, The Artificery. Your website's theartificery.com.
yeah, but don't go there.
Okay. So go check him out on
There's
Instagram.
because there's nothing there.
Go to his Instagram then. Go check out his work. I'm looking at it right now. It's a lot of beautiful stuff. Get some inspiration. We all need it. And you're doing a great job, Will. Thank you, bud.
All right, thank you very much.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Later, man.